I'm back. Hey guys, welcome to another stream, another live She Knows Arsenal. Make sure you guys are liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and all of that on your way in. Just a random stream. I just thought I'd go live and we can kind of continue a little bit of the conversation we were having earlier. And really like Napoli winning the Scudetto, which, you know, is super, super cool considering where they were last season. And the job that Antonio Conte has done is just super impressive. And seeing the scenes in Napoli with the fans celebrating, and, we've seen a lot of teams celebrate this season. And obviously, like all of them have their different, storylines and stuff like that. But this one in particular, really, I was moved, super, super moved because, Conte loses two of his best players in one season. He's going up against, Inter, and we know he's a world-class manager, and he proves it almost every single time he goes to a new club, barring Spurs. But it's just amazing how big of a difference a manager can make. Napoli were in and around like mid-table last season. They had a really, really difficult and underwhelming season. And then this season, they win the league, and the difference is the manager. It has to be the manager because he lost Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia in a very short period of time. So it can't be, oh, well, he brought it. No, it's definitely the difference between a world-class manager and not, and the difference a manager can make. And we often have conversations as Arsenal fans around, like, is it just that our manager doesn't have the right pieces, or does he just not know how to win? And this is kind of what I was saying earlier about some managers just know how to get it done and other managers don't. That doesn't mean that you're not a good coach. That doesn't mean you don't know how to put together a good team and get points. But there's a big difference between being a good coach and being a winner. And seeing the Napoli fans celebrate Scott McTominay's goal and, winning the Scudetto overall and all that kind of stuff, it's like, when's the next time we're going to feel that for our club? So many different emotions off of the back of this season. I think this season was really, really, really tough. And, I had this conversation. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I didn't know you were going to call me back right then. But yeah, just having this conversation with, group chats and friends. I'm just, when are we going to have this moment? When are we going to get the time to celebrate? How long do we have to wait? Because it's been 20 years plus since we've won a league title or a major trophy, and it's 5 years trophy drought, and I want to celebrate. Like, I want to have those moments at some stage, so it's a tough one. It's like this season has been super tough, and it doesn't feel like there's much to look forward to for next season. But I mean, maybe Napoli felt that way, but I don't know. It's just the feeling that I know the Napoli fans are having right now, and just the scenes just made me think, when are we going to have a chance? Mata says, did anyone have McTominay scoring a bicycle kick and winning a trophy this year? I think the McTominay goal and McTominay's season is so interesting because he was like a laughing stock at Manchester United, or not a laughing stock, but they basically kicked him out. Like, they really wanted him out. They blamed him for a lot of things. They blamed Rashford for a lot of things. They blamed Antony for a lot of things. And it turns out that all of those players have been able to go to other places and do relatively well. McTominay is doing really well at Napoli. Antony's doing really well at Betis. Rashford's doing well at Aston Villa. And so sometimes it's not, the fact that they're just like these bad players. It's just the environment is not good. And Manchester United's environment is not great. I think we've known that over the past 10 years or so, that the environment wasn't great. Who would have thought that, Ollie would have been the best coach that they've had over the last couple of years in terms of just the overall, like, football and, their status in the league and all that. I know Ten Hag won a couple of trophies, but I think the last time that people were genuinely felt like United were a good team was when they were with Ollie, and we still thought that that was kinda strange, so, yeah. AMD says they did the same to Ronaldo in what they do, just like Chelsea. Yeah, they did do the same to Ronaldo, and I'm sure he feels justified because I feel like when you kick a player out and a good player or a decent player, or somebody from your academy, and they're villainized, if you don't turn around and go to get like immediate success, I do think it throws into question whether or not that was the right move. And, Ronaldo was definitely, I think, a tough move for them to make to kick him to the curb. He's one of their legends. He he's just a massive, massive icon for Manchester United and such an important player for who they are as a club, so it was just very strange, like, the way that they kicked him to the curb, but we know that with managers, they come in and, they have to make their mark, and a lot of times that comes with getting big players out so that they can get a hold of the locker room, and, Ten Hag did it with Ronaldo, and Amorim did it with, um Rashford. And when you don't turn that around and start the trajectory goes straight up, I do think it calls into question whether or not it was them or was you, It was it them or was it you? Gunner for Life says footy judge Mo cooking. Listen, um Inter are such a good team, and of course, like, not winning the Scudetto is really probably devastating for them, I'm sure. They still have an opportunity to win, Champions League, in a week's time. So let's see what happens. But yeah, I'm sure Mo is devastated, but it wasn't in their hands today. So they had to hope that um Calgary, yeah, Calgary, right? Cagliari? Cagliari? Beat Inter or they drew and then they won, so yeah. Samuel says Rodrigo news was fun, like always making a stream. Um, the Rodrigo stuff, I don't know. I feel like it was coming from that Plettenberg person. I don't know how reliable he is. He's doing a lot of Arsenal updates, but nothing is really happening. So he's saying in talks, stuff is hard, blah blah blah. It may just be the case that he's capitalizing off of Arsenal, fans' desperation and trying to make it seem like things are happening when they're not. Um, hand of um, Hand of Arsenal, I think it was like used to be Hand of Ozil says we haven't started any talks with anyone, so not to really fret or worry, so maybe it's just, you know, it is what it is. We'll wait and see. I think with Arsenal, the one thing that always frustrates me is how slow we move. And I was hoping with Berto we'd move a little bit faster. Now I know the window hasn't opened, but most teams can start to get things done or get things lined up or start putting in bids before the window really opens. And we're kind of like, we're still trying to lay all of our options out on the table and then we'll unanimously decide on one person. And it's like, just, just decide and get it done. AMD says, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I don't know whether or not getting all of your options out there and doing all the groundwork on a million different players and then unanimously deciding, and then because the buzzwords that they're using is like doing the groundwork and pulling the trigger, you know, pulling the trigger and doing the groundwork. And I'm just like, we'll see whether or not it works and whether or not it's good based on how our window pans out. Part of me feels like The reason why we haven't really chosen between Sesko or Gyökeres is because I still think they're waiting to see what happens with Isak. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, I just think that we're delusional, and Arteta's obsessed with him and probably wants to see what happens against Everton to see if they finish in the Champions League spots or not. So maybe that's why we haven't really chosen, because that's basically what Ornstein said. We haven't really chosen yet. So, you know, we'll see on that one. But I'd like for us to just get a move on, but it is what it is. Mata says slow on the field, slow in the market. Redemption says we learned that we are done with this project manager and young players. Dr. Ken says, nah, the truth is they might be moving behind the scenes. True. Burmese says if both Trossard and Nelly stay, it does not bode well for getting a left wing in. Back to we learned that we're done, not like done with this project manager and young players. I just think that, I guess Arsenal fans, because I know a lot of Arsenal fans feel like we don't have any power. And I think that that comes from knowing that the fan base is quite apathetic when it comes to, trying to make change. I think there's a lot of reluctancy to be too negative or to be too vocal or to mobilize at the stadiums and really like stop buying and stop doing this because of what happened with Wenger and how bad that felt after the fact. So now they don't really want to mobilize or really like try to push or anything. So it just turns into apathy. But I do think the fan base needs to figure out whether or not they want to win or if they want Mikel Arteta to be manager of Arsenal Football Club. Now, before the season starts, what do we want? Because the fans are very important, and if we stop putting our money into the club, they will change. If there are empty seats in the stadium, they will change. If there are, Arteta out banners in the terraces, they will make change. And I think from a fan base perspective, and I've even pressed people in my own group chat about this, is when is it enough? When will you decide that we need to move in a different direction? When does he need to start winning? And there's reluctancy, like there's true reluctancy on that other side, to give it a timestamp, to give it a due date, to say when enough is enough. And I don't quite know why that is, because it's not Arteta FC, it's Arsenal FC. And if he's not good enough, then he's not good enough. But when you watch this, the amounts of celebrations that happen when you win something and the amount that we have to watch that we don't partake in, I just wonder how long will you wait before you're like, enough is enough? Because we 100% have power. We just don't have the ability as a fan base, I think, because the fans are afraid to do what they did to Wenger. And I understand that. It was traumatizing. It was like really harsh. It felt bad. And so they're wedded to the idea of Mikel. But, if he's not good enough, do you want to win or do you want him to be manager? And that they're not mutually exclusive. You might want us to win with him as manager, but at a certain stage, if he's not the guy, then those two things need to be separate. The Arsenal perspective says no buying merch. Redemption says, are we Arteta FC or are we Arsenal FC? Tabuki says, so easy fix our squad and Bomo, Gyökeres, Rodrigo, and pay their wages, but we would rather spend 100 million on a DM and a CB. Yeah, I'd love to see that amount of players come in. I'd really love to see the front line have 2 new starters in it, Saka plus 2 more. I just think it needs a complete shakeup and dynamic. And I'd also love to see another midfielder come in. I don't think that will happen, but 2 attackers would be amazing, you know? So let's see. Burmy says Arteta has to be held accountable for some of what occurred this season. The criticism is valid. What parts of this season do you feel like he should be accountable for? I think that's, the hardest part is because we don't see everything. I'm not 100% sure what exactly it's like, I don't know exactly what to pinpoint on him, because a lot of the games where we didn't win, I did feel like there was enough out there on the pitch to win, and I'm like, like, what part of that is actually on him? Um, I think where I really do hold him accountable is his lack of rotation, and the fact that over the last 3 seasons, it's not just this season. I know that we had so many injuries this season that we had to kind of use some players like a bar of soap, like Timber or whatever. But over the last 3 seasons, we've been beating it with a dead horse. Like, when are you going to rotate? When are you going to rotate? When are you going to rotate? And he just never did. And now we have a core group of players that had excellent fitness records and were physical specimens and, could really like play every full 90s that could barely walk now, and you just don't know if you'll be able to walk that back. You don't know if they're ruined, because, sometimes players just do not rebound from being used like a bar of soap like that. So, I think that's definitely something that I hold him accountable for, is the lack of rotation that inevitably meant that our season went down. Um, I remember at the beginning of the season when I was complaining that we didn't look good, and people were saying, "Oh, we're just relaxing and trying to hold our energy for the second half of the season." And I was just like, "Nah, like that can't be it. Like, we're not looking this bad. It's not like we're going at 75%. It's we're not the football is rank. Like, we're not creating chances. It's not a level of building up fitness. It's not looking good, So um and then for our season to kind of like, I mean, it was pretty flat the entire time. We were kind of just like right in here. And then we had the Real Madrid game. And then that kind of, I think they could get up just about for that tie, and they did. And then there was nothing left for PSG after that. So I would love for the rotation to be so much more aggressive next season, understanding that players are playing a lot of minutes. They've been on the edges of fitness. A lot of players have had massive injuries, like Timber and Ben White and stuff. Like, they need to be rotated a lot better. If we're winning 5-0 for, and I think a lot of this came then in the season, like the last season, a lot of our players played full 90s, even when we were winning 5-0, 4-1, 3-0. They were playing the full 90. And Arteta was like, no, there's no way I could give Ethan Nwaneri 20 minutes at the end of this game because I just couldn't give it to him. There's no way that we could have just played a super rotated side against, PSV. I think that's who we played, right? Yeah, rotated squad against PSV, which was a dead rubber because we were already first in the group and it was like a full-on dead rubber. And instead of just playing a fully rotated side, he had our starters out there. He had Declan Rice out there, and I think he had Saliba. Like, those decisions cost you in the end. That full season of him white knuckling about 12 to 13 players, almost all of them broke down at some point this season. So, yeah, at some stage, like, he needs to get the rotation together. I think that's the one thing I definitely will hold him accountable for this season, because we never end the season strong, and we should be at this stage. Everybody else has all this energy for the end of the season. And we are like, our players are holding onto their knees and doubled over. And he's like, well, we didn't have a good squad. We started off with a thin squad and we knew players would get injured. And I'm like, is that supposed to make me feel better? No. So I feel like he should be accountable for that, because that's up to him. Let's see. Here to there says, cheers, Jess. 4 of Europe's big 5 leagues won by first-year managers, and the other, Luis Enrique's second year. Change isn't the worst thing. I didn't even think about that, 4 of Europe's big 5 leagues won by first-year managers. Slot, Flick, Conte. Who are the other ones? Company. Slot, Flick, Company, Conte. And then the other one you said was Luis Enrique. You're right. And they all have varying levels of Um, Varying levels of experience. Company had, like, no experience at, like, the top level. Conte, we know, as a world-class manager. Hansi Flick, first time in La Liga kinda thing. So, yeah, that's actually really, really interesting, and I just feel like there's a lot of positive signs towards if you lose your manager at this stage or you make a change, everything is not gonna fall apart. I really don't like the dooming that people do where they're like, "Oh, well, if we lose Arteta, then all of our best players will leave because they only came for him. Everything will fall apart. We won't be able to attract good players anymore. You know, it'll just get worse from here. Who do we get?" And I'm just like, there's plenty of managers you could get. You can get there's plenty of managers that you can get. There's really, really good managers out there. AMD says, "Is it true we have 100 million and need to sell to spend more?" I have no idea if that's true. I know that Sky Sports said we have at least 100 million to spend. When somebody says we have at least 100 million to spend, I think it's somewhere around there, which is what we probably do have is probably like 100, 150, and then we have to sell. But I don't know 100% what we have or what we don't have. We should borrow the bridesmaids tifo from Liverpool for the upcoming season until Arteta wins something. My goodness. I mean, I've seen some embarrassing things, but that was pretty embarrassing. You know, I mean, he's really getting he's getting the reputation of being a nearly man, and he has to change that at some stage, you know? Um he has to change that at some stage. Redemption says, "Does anybody honestly believe Newcastle won't get UCL? It's wasted time." I mean, my hope for this final day of the season is that somebody big misses out, right? Or else why are we watching? If Aston Villa and Nottingham Forest are the only 2 teams or the teams that miss out, that would be a little disappointing, wouldn't it? You know, you kinda want like, they're gearing up and, like, building it up to be something big, and if it's just like, you know, Newcastle and City and Chelsea make it through and, oh, Aston Villa and Nottingham Forest didn't have enough, that'd be a little disappointing. But I do think realistically, it probably is the case that Newcastle will get past Everton, and we know Man City will do whatever they need to do on the final day. The only team that is questionable is Chelsea, and whether or not they'll be able to, because they haven't had a great away record this season. So will they be able to go to Nottingham Forest and beat them at their spot? I don't know, you know, but that's the only one that feels like is in jeopardy at all, you know, really. And Aston Villa should be able to come up with 3 points against Man United because I just don't see them being able to get up for a game against Aston Villa in front of their fans that are going to probably be devastated off of the back of that Europa League final lost. So, yeah, I think Aston Villa will beat Man United at home. I think Newcastle will beat Everton. I'm forget who Manchester City are playing, but I'm pretty sure they'll beat whoever they have to play. So yeah, you know, the only one that feels like is in jeopardy is Chelsea. But in regards to like, what does that have to do with us? Newcastle making Champions League or not will not change the fact that we're not getting Isak. So Jessa says it's going to be hostile at Old Trafford. It's going to be absolute carnage. I just do not feel like the level of like devastation that has consumed the Manchester United fan base has been the tastiest copium that I have tasted. All I needed was like this is what I'm telling you guys. Nothing annoys me more than Manchester United. Nothing. There's no bigger enemy for me, Jessica Black, than Manchester United. So tasting those tears was, I mean, I went everywhere. Goldbridge, United View, you know, everywhere to Lies, Culture Cam, SDS, Saeed, KG, like everyone back to back to back. I must have watched hours worth of them and their fan cams and they're crying because that like that Europa League final was so important for them and they were horrendous. They were horrendous. I mean, it reminded me so much of what happened to us against Chelsea. I mean, we were worse in terms of like the result, but nobody needed that more than we did. we needed to win that Europa League final in order to make Champions League. And Chelsea had already qualified for Champions League, so they didn't even need it. And I'm not saying that Tottenham didn't need Champions League, but out of the two teams, United needed it. United needed it badly, and they are in trouble. Like, they are in trouble. So, yeah, I think it's going to be hostile. I wouldn't be surprised if they sold a big player. I don't know who it'll be. I think Garnacho will go because he was talking absolute nonsense after the game. They're going to get rid of Rashford, some French players, but maybe Kobe Mainu, maybe Bruno Fernandes. So, yeah, it's going to be dark for them for a while. It's going to be dark for them for a while. I hope. I would love for them to get relegated. I'm sorry. Like, I know it sounds so bad, but like when they started talking about relegation, my mouth started to water. I was like, you could get relegated next season, couldn't you? Because you're so bad, right? Sometimes hating can be almost as satisfying as loving your own team. And that's the sad truth. That is the sad truth. I'm going to be so honest with you guys. I would love for them to get relegated. There's nothing I hate more than them. Nothing. The Arsenal Perspective says some reports saying that the whole squad is available for sale. Not that they sell everyone, but everyone has a price now. Y'all want a little Kobe Mainu? Throw a little 50 million out there to see if we can get him to be a backup for Rice. Well, they have such a bad squad that there's not much I would take off of it, to be honest, though. Like, there's just nothing that I would want from it. Maybe only Kobe and as like a backup. Samuel says, I still get roasted for that 8-2 loss. Long may it continue. Blaze says, I don't want generalized, but they deserve that. Never forget how Manchester United legends like Paul Scholes banter Saka during the Euro 2024. I mean, Patrice Evra, Paul Scholes, Gary Neville, they can hold that. The amount that they talk about us when their team is like in the literal gutter. There is nobody that is there's nobody holding an L worse than us than United. Like, literally, like, they have had a worse season than us, and by a long, 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 long way. Like, it's dark. The fact that we know that Erik ten Hag would have won that final is crazy. I know we all know that in our gut, that Erik ten Hag would have found a way to scam that final. He would have. He would have not gone out to that Spurs team. He wouldn't have. He wouldn't have. And Ollie wouldn't have either. The fact that Amorim did it was crazy. And he was the most gassed of them all. Like, they were talking about Moncler and wearing Versace and shit. I'm just like, come on, man. Surely we're not loving the manager because he's wearing a Moncler coat. Imran says, the best way to hurt the Man United folk is to win trophies repeatedly. Nothing else. You're not wrong about that. The Arsenal Perspective says, Erik ten Hag wins finals. Facts. Amorim is not the one. So crazy. Errol says Spurs to go down. Mata says hopefully Arteta doesn't want Garnacho. That would kill me. But I think Chelsea will probably look at him. Leigh says that Europa League final was such a bad game. It was a bad game, but I would say, I'll be honest, I don't think all finals are like this, but I do think a lot of finals end up being quite disappointing because both teams are so afraid to lose that they play really tight. I think the better games are usually like quarterfinals or semis or whatever, but that was more just like both teams are just genuinely really bad, and one team was just less bad than the other on the day. I thought Ange got more of his tactics right. He had a better hold of what he was going to get done. And, they literally won it on an own goal. Like, that's crazy, Errol says Gary Neville is banned from Forest and Chelsea game. I mean, he should be banned from some of our games too. I mean, well done, Nottingham Forest. I like that. Put your dick on the table and tell him who's boss, hello. He is a disgrace. Like, there's so many times where he just says things that are just so rude, and I just don't know why more people don't ban him. You have every right to not let people in your home. So why would you let him in your house? Like, come on. He's annoying. Burmy says, you're right. Ten Hag would have made it happen. He would have, he would have made it happen. We know that. Lionel says, hating United is healthy. So yeah, but that's how I've basically been coping for the last couple of days, is watching them understand how bad it's been, for them. And it also shows that, like, trophies are very important. And, and I was saying this earlier, that trophies, the way that we discount trophies as a fan base, I do find it to be quite strange, because everybody knows that that's what it is about. Like, it's about winning. Like, you want to win. But we also know that there's a certain kind of status that you have, or a certain type of consistency and foundations that you have that allow you to win the biggest trophies consistently, and to always be in the conversation. And being in 12th, 16th and shit is not it, and that's not that Crystal Palace's FA Cup wasn't amazing, or even what Tottenham did wasn't amazing for them. But from an Arsenal perspective, it's the balance really just remains that, like, we need to be winning trophies, but we also need to be challenging every season. And if we're not there, we haven't made it to where we're supposed to be. So we need to figure out how to get there. Redemption says Goldbridge still thinks they can get Gyökeres. Imagine. I mean, they technically still could, though. Redemption. Let's be honest. I mean, it's not. We're probably we're in a better position now than we were pre the Europa League final, because now they don't have Champions League. But the reality is he wants to leave Sporting, and he's not going to stay there. So if we go get Sesko, why wouldn't you go to Manchester United? Why wouldn't he care? Like, why wouldn't he go? I don't think he's just going to stay there, at Sporting. So, he'd be going to, they're playing one game a week, they can convince him that it's going to be fine. Like, we're going to get players, so I do think that they still have a chance to get Gyökeres, but I think it's mostly just because we won't get two strikers. If we choose between either one of them, we'll get them. It's pretty much nobody else is in the race really for Gyökeres but us and United. So if we don't get him, he'll go somewhere, but it won't be because he's choosing them over us. It's because we don't want him. That's how I kind of feel about it, because we won't get both, so yeah. Arsenal perspective asks, do you really care that Spurs won? No, I don't. I feel like I was already mad before that final. And I just feel like it's just annoying that they won, because then we have to hear the chirp, 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 chirp. But whether they won that Europa League final or not, and maybe the final ended up being Bodo Glimt and Bilbao, and we didn't have anything to worry about, I'm still very annoyed that we haven't won anything. I don't feel like that final has anything to do with it, but I do understand why Arsenal fans have like that visceral feeling. It's because they are a rival and they're winning a European trophy and we don't have one, so I personally, it didn't change my life that much. It was annoying, and the online stuff was annoying, but the annoyance was already there from the season. Like, I was already annoyed, you know? So yeah, it's not keeping me up at night. It's just annoying, and watching everybody around us celebrate is more annoying than like Spurs are winning. It's just I want us to win something for once. Redemption says Liverpool may go for Gyökeres after Wirtz and just dominate next season. Lucas says, which manager should we get to replace Arteta? Personally, I would take so many managers. I'm going to be really honest with you guys. I mean, I think I want to go for the winners first. The first probably manager I'd look at is like Nagelsmann, or, I would look at Inzaghi. I know Mo was telling me that we'd be the worst place for Inzaghi to go, but I don't care. You know, um, Inzaghi or Nagelsmann, like one of those two, somebody that's won something before. I think if we get into the situation where we need to find a new manager, it needs to be somebody that's already won something before. Because when we get rid of Mikel, if and when we get rid of Mikel, that core group will be itching for trophies. And so it can't be somebody that also needs time to figure out who, how to win things. So I think you'd have to go with somebody that's won things before. So Inzaghi would probably be my second choice. Nagelsmann would probably be my first, but you know, one of those two. And then if we couldn't get either one of those, I'd probably go for like Cesc or Thomas Frank or somebody that I know can work with less. So they're not going to be like, need a silver spoon and need all the best things. They can take the squad that we have and make it better and win games, and somebody that plays good football. I think if you're not going to get a serial winner, you need to get somebody that's not going to have us associated with anti-football and long throws and corners, so that's probably what I do. But by the time we get to that period of time, there may be more managers available, so to me, it's not like there will be people available, so yeah. Inzaghi, I find it hard to muster the level of concern over Spurs winning. I will say this, any team winning other than my own makes me turn back to look at my team and demand they win. Yeah, for sure. Mata says Inzaghi will have Saka at left wing back. So you were watching, so you remember what I'm talking about. Lina says Inzaghi don't like fluid football. I don't think he plays the creme de la creme of football that, say, at like what peak Arsene would be playing, or Pep with Barcelona. Like he's not going to play that style. But do they play better football than us? Hell yeah. I think case in point, the football that they played against Barcelona, which they're a very good footballing side. People have said Barcelona and PSG play the best football this season. And I didn't feel like Inter looked like they were out of sorts, or they weren't like one of these things are not like the other. They weren't playing anti-football. They weren't playing negative. Inzaghi, for me, that his team is comfortable whether they have 70% possession or 30, and they can utilize a bunch of different things. I think he's everything Mikel kind of wants to be. He wants to be flexible. He wants to be able to be more defensive. He wants to be able to be more attacking. He wants to be able to utilize counterattacks. He wants to utilize corners and free kicks. He wants to have all those types of things. I think Inzaghi is the perfect example of a modern manager that understands flexibility, and his type of football will do well in the Premier League, because in the Premier League, a lot of times you need to be able to kind of, be a little bit more flexible and, do this and do that and like not be so rigid. I feel like the only team that can kind of do their thing every day and it kind of is fine is probably Man City. So I agree that it's not fluid. It's not the creme de la creme champagne football, but it ain't ugly, and it's nowhere near as bad as the football that we play now. Nowhere near. Nowhere near. Our football is horrendous. World Boss says Klopp is the manager I want. He'll never come to us. He'll never come to us. I don't think he'll go to anybody in the Prem. If he goes somewhere, he will never go to anybody in the Prem. I think he respects Liverpool enough not to go to a direct rival. As much as they don't think we're rivals, he wouldn't go there. So the Arsenal perspective says I'm already convinced with who I want to replace Arteta. It's Luis Enrique. Luis Enrique is a good shout. I think, the principles are there. The football is there. He wouldn't be afraid to get ballers in the team. I think the one thing that scares me about Mikel is that he doesn't seem to be concerned about getting real footballers in the team. He wants people that excel without the ball instead of people that excel with it. Yeah, I would take Luis Enrique. Samuel says, I'm going to go with Xavi. I think he can get us over the line. Xavi Hernandez is also available and wants to play in the Prem. He wants to coach in the Premier League. So there's that. And F says, is Wirtz 100% going to Liverpool then? Because if he is, and we get Sesko, then we're going back-to-back first time in years. then they're going back to back first time in years. I'm giving up on the title before the season even over. I actually do think Liverpool will get him. I think once Ornstein and Fabrizio they're not even talking about Bayern anymore. They're not even really intimating that they could come in. Remember when we were trying to get Declan Rice, every little bit of information that came from Ornstein and Fabrizio was Arsenal or da 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 da, but Man City are still wanting to in talks and do that. They're not even doing that. They're very much like they're trying to get it done. Like Liverpool are trying to get it done. They feel, and I think the turning point was Wirtz had given Bayern their word, and Bayern went into the media and said that they knew he was going to go to them, and Wirtz and his family were not happy about him or them exposing that they were gonna go there, right? And so to retaliate for their lack of, loyalty or whatever, they went and visited Man City and Liverpool, and I guess in that time, Liverpool convinced him, which is how quickly things can change. A mistake from your board or your sporting director can change the tide for you because them losing words. This is not missing out on Declan Rice. Missing out on Declan Rice is he's an English talent. Missing out on Jude, he's an English talent. Missing out on your best German player and you had him in your grasp. In my mind, if he does go to Liverpool, I would sack whoever made that decision to go into the media and say that they felt confident that he was going to sign for them. Redemption says Liverpool acting like a serious club. I could only imagine we win a league and then go even bigger for the next season. Nobody should be having a bigger summer than us, but alas. Here to there says Michael Edwards is turning the screws on the league. Wirtz, Frimpong, Kirkes. This might be Arne Slot era. Brad Pitt fan says next is Isak or Alvarez, and I'm not even joking. You never walk alone. Brian Holiday, thank you so much for your super chat, says we learned it doesn't take time. The process is PR to make fans okay when we're not winning trophies, and we are ready to win even if it's just a cup. Yeah, I think that's a really big lesson, and that sometimes a managerial change is all that you need. And I know people don't want to hear it because it's a little sacrilegious. I've never been afraid to talk about, I feel like it's strange that as a fan base, we steer away from the Mikel conversation. And often it's very hyper emotional and mostly built around narratives and agendas rather than actually fans sitting down and talking about, is this guy actually good enough or is he an idea? And when we first signed him, he was when we first brought on Arteta, he was an idea. They projected him to become a world-class manager, and they hitched all their wagons to this horse that was an idea of a manager. And so the idea was that he was meant to become world class. And the only way that we're going to win the Premier League up against an Arne Slot or a Pep is if our manager is world class. We have to have a world class squad and a world class manager. The Prem is not an easy league to win, and without that, you're not going to win it, right? And so Mikel has to hold up his end of the bargain. He's done his own damage to the squad to keep it from becoming a world class squad, and he's also doing damage on the sideline by making bad decisions here and there. So if he's not a world-class manager, then he's not good enough. Because we know you need a world-class manager in order to win this league. When is the last time a non-world-class manager? I know a lot of people didn't rate Arne Slot, but as soon as he wins Premier League, he's a world-class manager. Come on. So first year in the Premier League wins, whatever. So when's the last time a manager that wasn't top tier won? Leicester season, you need a top manager. And if Mikel's not that, I don't know. But a lot of people do feel like Mikel is world class and he's a top class, world class manager. And that's fair enough. I don't agree. And he says he is a world class manager. If you're talking about Mikel, fair enough. I'm not 100% sure I believe that he's a world class manager. I'm trying to understand what would make him a world class manager, because you can't count, there's no trophies, so yeah, there's no trophies. So what what would make him world class if you can't use trophies as a way to back it up. Here to There says Arne Slot was about to win the league at AZ. He has proven himself. I think Slot has only managed a year more than Arteta. Crazy, really? Here to There says Arteta is a world class politician, but not a world class manager. I mean, if you're in the chat right now and you think Mikel is a world class manager, tell me why you think that. I'm very like happy to like hear your reasonings because I want to know. I don't think that he is, but I think he's a good young coach. That's kind of where I sit with Mikel. So yeah. The Arsenal perspective says, question, what do you think about Arteta's comments of late, in particular, those upstairs do their job comment? I didn't like what he said there. Um, I think he's putting a lot of the blame on the board. I think that, his narrative from the season is that we started off with a small squad and he knew that players are going to get injured and I kept the team afloat, and kept us in second despite the board basically tying my hands behind my back and not getting me the players that I need. I feel like that was the narrative that he's come up with for the season and basically like almost like we owe him one for keeping us in second while we had all these injuries, kind of thing. And, they need to do their job kind of thing. But, as far as I'm concerned, you are a part of the guys upstairs because whenever we're doing something and the signing goes well, you're fully running the show. When things go awry, it's everybody else do it, because I need support. So which one is it? Are you a manager or are you a coach? Because they made you a manager and they gave you a lot of autonomy when it comes to transfers. We know that. Orensina said that a million times, so I don't know. I feel like he is putting a lot of onus on the board and sporting director, at least in public, they're the ones who led us astray this last summer. And I do think they did. I think the Cronkies and Edu and everybody behind the scenes, including Mikel, really fucked up this past summer, last summer. But I don't think he is excluded from that, so yeah, his comments are very much like people are like, well, that proves that he begged for signings and stuff. And I'm just like, I mean, I just feel like they couldn't come to a consensus on the player. And so instead of going with a backup option, because Edu's backup options probably were not that good, Arteta decided to go with what he had because he'd rather go with what he has than bring in somebody that likes that Arteta doesn't like, So I think everybody is involved there, but it is what it is, in the end of the day, whatever happens this next season is going to be an indictment on you. There's no way that in the last, like, if you count next season, if we don't win anything, that all of that is just everyone else and has nothing to do with you. That is way too much data to back up the fact that in 4 seasons you will have not won anything, when you had a good enough team to maybe do so, and that's not even counting the 2 first seasons that were incredibly disappointing when you lost to Olympiacos in the Europa League and went out in the round of 32. That doesn't even count when you went out to Emery's Villarreal in the Europa League. It doesn't even count when you couldn't beat Spurs or Newcastle at the end of the season when we had top 4 in our grasp and then finished 5th. It doesn't even add up all that shit either. So you had time. Blaze says Wenger and Mourinho also won the league and competed against Ferguson. We need to stop giving excuses and babying Arteta. Anise says the way we play and we competed against a Man City team almost unbeatable this season is the only case where we have to make him accountable. Top 6 team are afraid of us now. It says a lot about him. The way we play, we competed against a Man City team almost unbeatable. This season is the only case where we have to make him accountable. I kind of hear what you're saying there. I don't know if I 100% agree. Top 6 teams are afraid of us now. I don't know. if they're necessarily afraid. I just don't think that they can beat us right now. I think the fact that we have that top 6 record is, and people are waving it around like a badge of honor when we can't beat a mid-table team to save our lives is why I'm like, be nice to be able to beat Everton, be nice to be able to beat Bournemouth, whatever. But, you know, we didn't compete against a Man City this season. So maybe the last 2 seasons, yeah. So I kind of get what you're saying. I kind of get what you're saying. I just feel like it's just 3 seasons of nothingness is making it more and more difficult to really like justify, what we've done. It's wild. Kamal says he is not. Arteta is not a world-class manager. He might be one day, but I worry about his ego and lack of self-awareness. Anton Dunn says Arteta is definitely not a world-class manager. World-class managers use the players to the best of their ability instead of focusing on the system alone. Arteta is a good manager, but he is not world-class manager. Pep, Mourinho, Klopp, Wenger, Flick are world-class managers who had experience to get over the line. Arteta isn't a world-class manager. I realized that last season. He's just a guy before the main guy. No way, he's not. He has potential, but until he wins trophies, he can't be considered world-class. Brian says, I was done with Arteta when he started making excuses in press conferences. A world-class manager takes accountability. He is out of answers. I think I would prefer don't touch that, or else I'll put you on camera and make it so everybody can see you. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of things that you guys said then. You know, he needs to win things in order to be considered world class. And, when you have somebody like Xabi Alonso, who won in his first year, basically, in a league that he's not supposed to win, and they just look so solid and confident that whole season. And, I just think about the way we crumble at the end of every single season and the way they didn't. I just feel like that's a managerial thing. So yeah. F says, some of my friends tell me Arteta has the makings of a generational manager. While I never saw the back-to-back title races coming, I can't help but feel that if he really is that guy, he'd have a Premier League by now. I guess my question would be, why would you not see the back-to-back? Or, I mean, you may have not been able to see it. I will say that the first title race caught me by surprise. The first title race definitely caught me by surprise. I did not think that we would be 8 points ahead of like City at any point and be like bearing down for a title, So I hear that. But we should have been expecting us to be challenging for titles, whether we saw it or not, around year 4, or year 3. Because he had half a season, he had 2 full seasons. And I don't think there was really any reason why we shouldn't have made the top 4 in the season that we didn't, and we finished 5th. I thought that's setting us back. We should be in Champions League now. And then the next season, we ended up in Europa League, but we challenged for a title. And that might have been a little bit like, because going from missing out on top 4 to being in a title race is quite a jump, but I think if you have unlimited time as a manager, unlimited time, a lot of resources and no pressure and carte blanche to build the team the way that you want to, I do feel like you should be able to get into a title race within like 3-4 seasons. I don't see why you can't, but maybe I'm being, I don't know. Samuel says, I don't think Mikel even thought of that. Arteta wouldn't survive long at Barca or PSG. The media there's the polar opposite of Arsenal press corps. They would eat him alive. Yeah, I mean, I think he wouldn't survive at any other top club as long as he survived at Arsenal. I think he would have got sacked in that period of 8-9 games where we didn't win a game and he was playing Willian. I think that's what would have been the end of him then. And then when maybe he didn't make top 4, he would have got sacked. And then he definitely would have got sacked when he didn't win the league, so he's gotten like a lot of, chances, that most managers don't get. And so I'm wondering, when do we get our payoff? Like, when does it end? When do we get to enjoy the fruits, or is it just every day waiting on him to become something special? Anise says he would have wanted all at PSG and Barca. Look at us since we have a decent squad. I don't know if he would have wanted all at PSG or Barca. I mean, he may have won something at PSG, but not in La Liga. In Spain, I don't think he would have won anything. I can't see him winning anything at Barcelona. It's a more difficult league. It's a more rough league where, you have to deal with Atletico Madrid, you have to deal with Real Madrid. Like, yeah, maybe PSG because it's basically a one-horse race, but, even Emery, got sacked after winning the league on. Lay says, nah, the chances that United have given Amorim is way worse. Amorim is a bad manager, same as Ange. Redemption says the payoff is when we wake up as a club and realize he's not good enough. Burmy says 22-23 was a surprise. 23-24 close, but unlucky. 24-25 injury riddled, and second for the third time. This shows that Arteta is a good but not great coach. And it's like if there's any sort of friction between us getting something or not, we just can't seem to go through the pain barrier. And I just feel like good managers find a way for your team to persevere throughout difficult times. We couldn't, as soon as Saliba got injured, we decided, oh, we can't win. Fuck, Saliba's gone. There's no, we got to play Rob Holding. It's done. Then the next season it was, oh, well, we're going to shit the bread for the first half of the season, go to Dubai, need to be perfect, but not be able to beat Aston Villa. And then this season it was the injuries and red cards. At some stage you need to be able to persevere because every season is going to be hard. Like, every season is going to be hard. Blaze says, I think some people exaggerated a little bit when they say Arteta is world-class or a generational manager. Anton Dunn says, so you want Arteta out, Jess, or you want to see him with good attackers first? That's a really good question. I think I'm backed up against a corner feeling like all I have left is him seeing him with attackers because we know that that's what we're going to get. Like, there is no sacking him. So if it was up to me, he would have packed his bags at the end of this season, and he really should have went last season, in my opinion. I just feel like we're getting into like he's still an idea and he's not really living up to what he's supposed to, and I know he has like, oh, we have the most points tally at this point, and we beat all the top 6 teams this amount of times, and there hasn't been a better team in 2025 than us and all this. But I'm like, but in the margins that actually matter, like the actual season, we're not top, like we're not top. Like the only thing I really care about is not our points tally over the last 3 years or our record against top 6 teams since he's been in, or, how, the best team in 2025 from a points perspective. All of that just feels like a very weird way of saying that we haven't really been good enough, but I need you to squint to see that we could be. And I'm tired of fucking squinting. So we're going to see him hopefully with better attackers. But if it was up to me, I would move the manager on this summer because one more season of this. And I feel like some of these, well, one, you're going to lose Saliba. And so once you lose him, that's going to be tough on the club because they don't act well in the market. They're not good at replacing. But I just feel like it's going to be harder to pick this team up because he's also ran some of our core group into the ground. So yeah, Johnny says, yeah, you don't care about anything positive. Just got it. I mean, it's not about not caring about positive things, Johnny. That's not what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter that much because it doesn't end up in anything. It's not a trophy. We're not winning anything. So those like stats meant a lot more to me 2 years ago. 2 years ago when those, we started seeing the stats about our top 6, our record against the top 6 changing, and we started getting better against top 6, and we're accruing more points and all this. That was really impressive to me 2 years ago. But we're like well beyond that now, and we've gone what, 5 seasons without winning anything. And so I don't really think you can blame me for being a little fatigued of the stats that don't lead up to anything. So they are positives, but they don't mean that much. That's all I'm saying. It's not that it wouldn't change, like, that wouldn't be something that I would say, like, our top 6 record is a reason why I keep Mikel in the job, or the fact that we're the best team in 2025 is a reason for me to keep Mikel on the job, because it didn't lead to anything, you know? Are you guys not worried that he's a nearly man? I don't know how people are not concerned. And at a certain, like, the thing is at a certain point, Mikel will win something. A broken clock is right twice a day, or whatever the saying is. So if you keep him long enough in the job, he might win something in 2, 3 years or whatever. We know that. But what will we have lost in that time? That's all I'm saying. Like, I kind of get what you guys are saying. Like, when people are like, oh, you're so negative. But, you guys were saying that 2 years ago and nothing has changed. You guys are saying, oh, you're so negative 2 years ago, and it's gotten worse, you know? Jonathan says, I won't even waste my energy on Arteta anymore. The football is draining. It is what it is. But end it like, so what would, like, okay, outside of just we want to win, right? We want to win next season. That is a bare minimum requirement. He must win a trophy. But from a footballing standpoint, like, how would you like to see the football change? Because it's also, football is supposed to be fun to watch. As much as it's like win, 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 the football needs to be fun to watch too. Because if you're not winning, you at least want to be entertained, right? And so right now we're playing probably the worst football I've ever seen Arsenal play in my life. I'll be really honest. The level of football that we've played this season has been really difficult to watch. But there has to be some aesthetic things that you guys would like to see. So I'd love to hear in the comment section, what do you want to see from our football? Do you want to, is it the left-hand side working? Do you want to see us, be more direct? Do you want to see, more, goals from outside the box? Do you want to see us, what do you want to see? Because from a certain perspective, there's a twofold thing that I want to see. I really want to see trophies, but I really want to like the football that we play. I would not sacrifice trophies for a style of play, but I would like to see both if we can, if that makes sense. Um, so yeah, here to there says, spot on, Jess. People don't realize we have one of the best CB partnerships in Europe, arguably the best wave of Haaland talent in 20 years, and more funds than any time of the Emirates era. Kamal says, I honestly love to see Rice 6 and 2 aids. I would like to see that as well. 2 attacking aids like Odegaard and someone else, especially against the smaller teams. I feel like that would be so useful when we are trying to break down deep blocks. Jonathan says, now we get excited over corners, crosses, come on, hence why Sesko is coming. You didn't watch the 2019 or 2018, 2019. I did. Maybe that was a little bit worse, but if you're comparing it and the only thing that's worse than that is that season, then it doesn't really dispel my point, does it? The football has been shit, so that's the point. If the only thing that's worse than it is the 2018, 2019 season when Emery was here and we were conceding 30 shots a game, then I think my point pretty much stands. It's pretty bad. Our football is closer to that than it is what it was in 22, 23. It's just not a style. It's just not a thing. It must go away. So if you want to get pedantic about it and say, well, the 2018, 2019 season is way worse, it's the worst we've ever played. Well, this is not far behind it because it was bad. Taha says the style of football you see is important. That's why I was so much happier with Flick La Liga than Xavi La Liga title. Barcelona played fantastic football this season and they won. And I'm trying to think of a team this season that, I didn't watch a lot of Conte, so I don't know. And his football doesn't really give me the feeling that it's like some sort of fluid, beautiful football. That being said, we know Luis Enrique, Hansi Flick, Vincent Company, they played good football and won their league, you know. So I wouldn't say that beautiful football is the only thing that will win you something, but I don't see people playing anti-football and winning anything either, you know. So, and I do think what we play now is anti-football. I think it's corners and long throws and, you know, kicking it into people's shins and really poor touches and very stiff and robotic. It's really not what we should be playing as Arsenal. Because do you guys care about that? You know, because for a while we were like, okay, we're willing to change the style to win things, but do you feel like Arsenal should feel like Arsenal still? Keep putting your comments in. I'm gonna get some water. Give me 2 seconds. Hello, buddy. Sorry, I needed this water so bad. Okay. Okay. So Jonathan says good football is a part of Arsenal DNA. Maybe George Graham was different, but he was a winner, so fans accepted it. Good point. Redemption says if we are going to play terrorist football, then get the best manager at it so we win. That's the only way I accept playing this way. Blaze says some people in the chat still defend Arteta and blame the players. Anton says, I care a lot about that. And I think a lot of Arsenal fans do because we grew up on Arsenal. And so we think of our football a certain way. I remember there was a certain point where only Barcelona, Pep's Barcelona in like 2009 played better football than Arsenal. There were times where they would actively seek out our players in the transfer market because they knew that our players could play their way, you know, like Fleb and Alex Song, and you know, eventually, you know, obviously Cassess came from La Masia, and you know, so I do feel like, yeah, I just don't. I feel like we need that. Like we need to play much better football because when we're playing better football, I feel like we're just a much better team, you know, and there's a way for us to play better football and still be defensively solid. But Arteta feels like we need to white knuckle the ball all the time and hold on to it for dear life and not move and try to get corners and shit. And that's just not working. The McChronicle says, Brian, FA Cup all day, every day, 3 times on Sunday. Would you take 8th in an FA Cup or no trophies in 2nd? I don't really like either one of those options. To be honest, I still feel like the option there, we need to be challenging and with a trophy. Because we had 8th in a FA Cup, and although it did feel good on the day, you know, it didn't really solve any of our problems. We were like horrendous the next season, worse than we were the season prior. So, hello. You want to say hello? Hello, it's me. Welcome. Okay. Redemption says we are going to be prime Stoke City next season with Havertz and Sesko up front. Yeah, and you can still play exciting football without it being juga de position or whatever the fuck it is, you know. You know, like I said, like Inter, they don't play the type of football that we're used to, but it's definitely not stiff blank football like we play, you know. So yeah. Jonathan says, are you worried Mikel will stifle Ethan's natural ability? Ethan already looks scared to try things. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I haven't really thought about it because Ethan has been so far in the periphery of my thoughts because we have so many other problems. So it's like, okay, Ethan's there, but like it's going to be fine. He'll develop on his own. But, you know, I think what we liked about Ethan when he first came in is that he wasn't afraid to try anything. And he, like, him and MLS were like a breath of fresh air because they hadn't been like Artetaized already. and like sterilized and shit. And I don't know if I feel like he's afraid to try things or he stopped trying things. I feel like it was more like a physical thing. But you know, Arteta has stripped away some of the like natural creativity from some of our players, and just like, you know, it's the patterns and make sure you pass it around and sideways and all that. So I don't know. And Arteta doesn't like dribblers. Like if he does like dribblers, it's new to me, because especially in midfield, he doesn't have any dribblers in his team. He doesn't really have anybody that, you know, will break down these blocks or break down the lines from just dribbling. And I think one of Ethan's better qualities is that he's not afraid to dribble. He's not going to burst by you, but he likes to dribble. And so I wonder if Arteta will take that away from him, because nobody dribbles in midfield. It's just passing. So we'll see. Blaze says, I don't like how people trying to downplay Barcelona. They play with a high line, but they were more consistent than Madrid this season. I don't know who's playing down Barcelona, but it's a different league. So, you know, they play good football for what their league requires, and it won them the league. But Barcelona do play fantastic football, but it's also based around a lot of individual brilliance and X factor. Basically, against Inter, all they really did was, you know, it wasn't like, and Pedri is different, but for the most part, they were basically getting the ball to Lamine Yamal and Rafinha, and they were doing their thing, you know, and whether it came off or not is, you know, it either did or it didn't. But Barcelona plays scintillating football. It is super high quality football, and it's based around having exceptional attacking players and really good midfielders. And, you know, they don't have the best defense, but when you have a 10 out of 10 attack, so you can get away with it. You know, the amount of goals that Rafinha and, you know, Lewandowski and Lamine Yamal scored. I know Lamine Yamal scored quite a few less, but just the dynamic of that attack is something that I would kill for, because it takes so much pressure off of your defense when you have players that can bail you out. And so I don't know why anybody would downplay Barcelona. They play great football. It's not the football that they used to play with Pep. It's not that, but it's definitely good football. That's for sure. They're very fun to watch for sure. But yeah, Jonathan says good football is a part of Arsenal DNA. Maybe I read that one. Let's see. I read that. Jonathan says the players are to blame when push comes to shove. You behave like a child and miss an open goal. Let's see. Johnny says, nah, we'll win the league next season or bust. Redemption says, we are going to be prime. I read that one. Anton Dunn says, who do you think will be our second signing? I don't even know, because Zubi hasn't even really been, you know, I think that's kind of done, but they're kind of drip feeding us little things here and there because, you know, the season has been so disappointing. So it's kind of like, you know, let's just act like it's inching along so that they can have something to be excited about. But you know, after Zubamendi, which I would assume that is our first signing. I don't understand why he would, you know, it would take long at all. Like they're not going to the Club World Cup. It should really be announced like the day after the season ends. Like, let's be real. But Zubamendi, and then I don't know, to be honest, because I don't really know what's taking them so long to decide on the striker. So, I mean, Ornstein said the resolution on the left wing would take a long time. So he must know something that we don't know. And I'm not quite sure what that is. You know, on one of his reports, Ornstein said the resolution for Arsenal on a left wing is going to take a while. So don't like expect anything on that soon. Arsenal are going to focus on the striker first. So maybe the striker will come in next, and then we'll see. You know, I know a goalkeeper and a defender is coming in, and then maybe left wing. I don't know. But I don't like the idea of Martinelli and Trossard both staying, because it makes me feel like they're not going to get a left wing, but we'll see. Taku says Conte is goated league manager. He's so good. Wayne says poor recruitment meant on a bunch of average players, not good enough. We will not win nothing under the manager every year is next year. Johnny says, Arteta discussion aside, you know what I don't want? A four-peat of seconds. That would be a nightmare. I feel like I want seventh and a Europa League next time, then another second. Redemption says, William Sesko is my prediction. Project Youth, excuse FC. Not Project Youth. Jonathan says, keeping Trossard and Partey side, perfect time to refresh the team. I saw Clive from Arsenal Vision talking about this, and he was, he wasn't really like saying that much, but he did kind of discuss it and was like, these are seasoned professionals that aren't really hurting us, but is it not time to refresh? Isn't this a good time to refresh? And I'm like, yes, it is a good time to refresh the squad and try to turn over a stale group. I think because you waited the additional year to get the attackers, a lot of players have gone stale, and you almost need a mini rebuild type of thing where it's, what are you doing? Like a mini rebuild of sorts. You need to refresh some of these, like, players that, yeah, you could keep them around, but like wouldn't like a younger, really super talented player that plays that same position be a better option? Trossard is basically like false nine, left wing cam. Could you not replace him with Xavi Simmons? If you need a different type of DM. I know that we were like linked to Andre Santos. There's other players that you could bring in if you wanted to replace Partey, or just let Miles Lewis Skelly play there and get like a super good left back like Ait Nuri. Is there not a way to like just rejudge the squad in a way that doesn't feel so okay? So you need to getting rid of Georgie, so we need to get a Georgie replacement. Okay, so we need a striker, so we're just going to add the striker in. We're going to, it's very like we're just trying to do the bare minimum to improve the squad instead of it needs a shakeup. I think it needs a shakeup, but Karubal says Zubamendi is a Marino type signing. I don't know why Arteta fans think he will change anything. Honestly, I disagree on the Zubamendi thing. I think when it comes to DMs, because the DM position is not an exciting one, it tends to be like minimized quite a bit, especially because we bought so many DMs in the last couple of years. It's like, oh, another DM, he's not going to change anything. But one of our biggest problems in the DM position is I do feel like, with Partey like aging and maybe, having his problems here and there, whatever, we lack a little bit of like the type of player that can speed things up and slow things down and really control the tempo. And one of the things that Zubamendi is really good at is his decision making when he slows the play down, and when he speeds it up, and his ability to pass quickly between the lines at the right time to release our attack. I think those things are needed in our midfield, and he has a really good technical level. We need more technical, like a higher technical level in midfield anyway. I do think Zubamendi will make a change. Is it going to change the top end of the pitch? No, it doesn't, unless you get like top class attackers. But I actually think Zubamendi is a really good player. I do think he's on that level of like the João Neves and Vitinha type players, like that he will make that type of difference for us. It's just a matter if you have the Dembeles and the Doués and those types of players, the Barcolas, or if you still have Trossard and Martinelli and Kai Havertz, So I like Zubamendi. I don't have a problem with the signing. And I think it's unfortunate that I don't think he's going to get a fair shake, because if we don't get the players that people want, then people will pretend like Zubi is some bad signing. And I don't think he is going to be a bad signing. I feel similarly about the way that Calafiori came into our side. Is we didn't really want another left back. It was kind of annoying that we're getting a left back. We knew he was good, but it's like we didn't need him. And so he was like very much so overdrafted before he even started. So any little mistake he made, any like imperfection he had, any, whatever, it was like, oh, I told you he was shit. Oh, and then now at the end of the season, people are saying, I hope you didn't sell your stocks. It's like, well, why would you sell your stocks on Calafiori? Why? Calafiori is not a player that gets the sell stocks conversation. Like, let's be so, like, there's players that you look at and you know that they are quality. They are top players. His injury record is bad, and we know that. But in terms of like the level of quality we're talking about, nah. This is a player that, Italian people were like crying, Serie A like heads were crying that that player was not in their league anymore, crashing out on social media because Juve couldn't get that deal done. It's a player that if we didn't get him, he would have ended up at Real Madrid. But people are talking about, don't sell your stocks. I hope you didn't sell your stocks. Like, are you serious? So I think we have to be careful about already like almost saying a player is not going to make a difference just because he's not an attack-minded player, because we need attackers. Anybody who's not attack-minded player is going to be up against it, in terms of the fan base and winning them over. Zubi is a good player, I meant to believe that the Arsenal fan base knows more than Xabi Alonso and Xavi Hernandez and Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola and all these people. No, come on. So yeah, here to there says agreed, Jess, but even if we had the PSG front three, if Arteta doesn't look within and change tactically, we will still be lacking in attack next year, but we need a real shakeup at the club. Yeah, I mean, Arteta has to change his everything. He has to change, whatever therapy he needs to go to rid himself of the trauma that he suffered after the 4-1. He needs conversion therapy to get away from being this pragmatic manager and go back to being an attack-minded manager. He needs to go to a boot camp, to just change him back into the player or the person that he was when he first got here, because he never tried to be negative until after we lost the first title, and then after that he just became so different. And at times the football did work. At the back end of last season, it was really, really good, but we didn't sustain it for the entire season. We couldn't sustain it and go into the next season with it. It's just everything is just, you just need to commit to being an attack-minded manager and understanding that that means that you're probably going to risk things and you're probably going to concede goals. But with the amount of money that you spent on defensive-minded players in Declan Rice, and you're going to spend 50 million on Zubamendi, you have Partey, you have, the center back pairing of Gabriel and Saliba, you have Calafiori and Kivior and Miles Lewis-Kelly and Timber and White, and Raya. You have to believe that those players are going to keep clean sheets every once in a while. You have to, but I don't know if it's like, does he not believe that those players are good enough? Like, what is it? Because why are you so defensive? Mata says, I like Kala, but watching him run around the pitch, he always looks like he's going to slip and do something stressful. Jonathan says, Kala has to play at least 60-70% of games next season, or else fans will be talking about it. F says, I don't watch Zubamendi like that. While it won't be enough, in my opinion, if Liverpool wanted him, plus he helped win the Euros with Spain, and he's got to be a class player. So, I mean, Xabi Alonso wants him at Real Madrid. You have to think about what's happening at Real Madrid right now. Xabi Alonso wants to keep Luka Modric, but the club doesn't want to. They're going to need a midfielder. The first midfielder that they wanted was Zubamendi, but we had already pretty much wrapped up the deal. He would be a Liverpool player if he wasn't afraid to go to Merseyside. So I kind of do think that, sometimes it's more about they're not the player that we want, so we write them off, versus are they a good player that just plays in a position that I don't necessarily care about improving right now, or, it's just not a priority for me. That's kind of how I feel. Zubamendi is not an exciting signing to me because it should have happened before already, and it's not a position that I'm particularly like thinking about, but like Calafiori, I do feel like he's a good player, so I'm okay to have him. We just need to get the other positions taken care of as well. Here to there says, we are very, very fortunate with the record-breaking set pieces and PK goals last year. There is a reason top sides don't think of set piece and penalty kicks as their bread and butter. Taha says, it took Sir Alex Ferguson 6 seasons to win his first title, so maybe Mikel will win it next season. I want him to succeed. He's La Masia graduate and a Barcelona fan. I mean, I know that Sir Alex Ferguson took 6 years to win. I know that Pep took several years to win his first Champions League. I get that. It's just they ended up being like the top 2 managers that we've ever seen in our lifetime. And so do I really believe that Arteta is in that same category, or do I believe that he's just a good coach and probably not a winner? I don't know, but we'll know soon enough. Like, like these types of stats only hold up for so long. Um, I think that he really needs to win something next season, and it's going to have to be a Premier League or a Champions League because he's bombed the domestic cups for so long that he doesn't have those to soften the blow. So he's going to need to win something big, and I hope he does. I'd prefer him to be the guy so it doesn't feel like we've wasted all this time. And he's a quote unquote Arsenal man, and he loves the club and all that. Of course I'd love it to be him, but if it's not, hit the road, Jack. It is what it is. Paperboy says Arteta has lost all the good will he had from challenging in the 2022-2023, so he might as well go back. Why is there this big fly in here? So he might as well go back to that, and it's not like we are better now. Do you think he can even go back to that level of football, because he really had like kind of stumbled upon something? That's something that I always wondered, is did he plan that, or did he stumble upon it? Like, was it the Gabriel, Jesus, and Zinchenko effect way more than what he thought it was going to be? Because I think he was genuinely surprised that we were that good. He was genuinely like shook that we were that good in that season. You know what I mean? So, and then he was never able to replicate it again. So if it was everything that you were trying to do, why can't you replicate it again? I don't know. It's crazy. Jonathan says it's all bad for Arteta, Jess. We almost won the league last season. Just need tweaks. Trust the players. I think you said it's not all bad for Arteta. I think that's what you mean. Ryan says, I don't think it's that deep. We sign Mendy, the center forward and left wing, mix that with a bit of luck and no injuries, and I'm fully confident next year. You're banking a lot on things that don't usually happen for Arsenal. A bit of luck and no injuries is not something that I've known as an Arsenal fan, but hey, hopefully. Burmese says there needs to be more of a balance between attacking and defensive football with more in-game tactical changes. I like that. Willow says, with the rumors today, do you see Nwaneri going to Chelsea with the way he's been sidelined as of late? We've seen that a couple of more reliable people have said that there's nothing to worry about. And before that, I wasn't worrying about anything, so I'm going to just hold my horses on that and not be too concerned about it just as of yet. But that is the risk that you take when you don't play talented players. They get the itch, so I don't think he can do what he did to Nwaneri this season and, not use him in his right position when Odegaard is not available or whatever and get away with it. I think that was the period of time that concerned me more than the end of the season. Was there was no Odegaard and he didn't use him there, and I know people made excuses for it, but he played Trossard there and it kind of worked until it didn't. And when it wasn't working, it was really bad. I would not want to go back and rewatch the games that we played where we were playing with Trossard and Marino in midfield, and try to like really scam our way through it. It was really tough, so that was actually what worried me more than at the end of the season when Saka and Odegaard were actually fit. I expected when they were fit for them to play. They always play. But when they were not there, especially Odegaard, I was kind of like, he probably should have played him then, because I know we had like Southampton and Leicester back to back. And he could have played him then. Those are like relegation sides. I remember Spurs came up right after that, and people were like, we couldn't play him then. And I was just like, all right, it is what it is, man. It is what it is. Jonathan says Gaffer doesn't trust Ethan defensively yet. Important for Mikel, unfortunately. Brian says, why do you think Arsenal fans are so patient? Arsenal fans would rather blame outside uncontrollable factors than the man that actually manages them. I personally, I think it's what we kind of spoke about earlier. I just think it's trauma from the Wenger situation. I think a lot of our fans, especially the online fans, are Arsenal in general are very used to having managers for long periods of time. And so I think we're built for longer term managers and riding the wave than like a Chelsea where you're kind of born knowing that you're gonna sack and fire and sack and fire and sack and fire and sack and fire, or hire and sack, hire and sack, hire and sack. So I think it's a little bit of that. Like we've been conditioned to like our best ever manager was there for like 20 years, or like I know people are saying Herbert Chapman. I get it, but Arson, the guy that a lot of us do remember, was there for like 20 years, right? So I think it's a little bit of that. And then, you know, when you bring in somebody and they're an idea, I think once you connect yourself to the idea, you're desperate for it to be fulfilled. I think when you bring in somebody like Emery, who wasn't an idea, Emery wasn't an idea. He was exactly what he was meant to be. He was a Europa League specialist, a kind of experienced manager that was really just brought in to win the Europa League and to deal with the squad that we had then. There was no idea around him. There was no story around him. It was very much like he's supposed to come in and win the Europa League. And when he didn't do that, he had failed. But when you have somebody like Mikel and you attach an idea to him, people get attached to the idea and they want to see it through. And so the idea about Mikel is that he's a young manager that has all the tools to become a generational manager and be just as good as Pep and these guys and Klopp or whatever. And I think people are very connected to the idea of Arteta because it feels very Arsenal-like. We're very nostalgic. We're very Disney. We like the story around things. That's why we're so connected to Hale End and, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just the way that the club operates. If for the next 20 years we hired and sacked and hired and sacked and hired and sacked, the next generation wouldn't give a fuck about a manager staying for 5-6 years. They wouldn't. That's what they would know. But in your lifetime, how many Arsenal managers have you actually seen? 1, 2, 3. So I think it's just that. I think it's like attachment to the idea of a manager that was meant to be the answer, to, he's the if you were to, I think, write or construct a new manager for Arsenal, for a lot of Arsenal fans, the idea of Arteta is what they would want. And I think they're attached to that. They don't want a Conte that's going to come in and, employ a 3-back and bring in, older players or whatever. They don't want, that they want an Arsenal man taking over Arsenal that's young and, that's what they want. And I think that's what it is. They've concocted the best type of like Arsenal manager that the fans would really get behind, and they're attached to the idea and they want to see it through. I think it's just that, and he's, for a lot of fans, I've heard them say that, that first title challenge season was the best season that they've ever experienced at Arsenal, which is sad, but also I can understand because if you're younger, like in your 20s, that's probably true. You've probably never experienced an Arsenal team that's actually good and wins trophies. So you're also attached to that. You're attached to that, which is it's sad. Like I'm like, damn, because that was a fucking nightmare to me. That was a nightmare, man. Burmy says, for some fans, Arteta is the prodigal son who has returned to bring AFC back to glory. Exactly. And it's kind of like, when, at least for like women, we do this. We see somebody and we're like, oh, there's potential in that person. I see this is who I think you can be. And so you attach yourself to the idea of what you think that person is going to be instead of just taking them at face value. And then you get upset because the person isn't exactly who you thought they were. But really you were basing them upon this like idea of somebody, right? And I think that's kind of what it's like with Mikel right now. The reality of him and who he's supposed to be are not really marrying together, but I think people are willing to ride the wave because I feel like eventually he'll get there. Nunny says, I'm done with MA owners, but also Berta. If we get Sesko, they all need to leave along with Arteta cult fans. There will be protests and fights in stadiums. Like Wenger watch people disappear from socials. I'll tell you guys right now that I don't like when we get shit. I love when we're better because it feels better to create content. I find it really difficult to create content when Arsenal are bad because I'm sad, and so it's easier for me to disconnect from the team and become more casual. I've only done it once in my life, like where I fully cut off Arsenal because I just was like, I don't recognize my club. Like, this is just not the club that I know. And that was around 2017, right around then when I was like, I'm fucking casual. Like, I just cannot do this anymore. I'm looking at the team and I'm like, this shit sucks, Um, and it was just tough, but I know that, in the next probably 6 months, it could get really dark. If things don't go right in the summer window and get around January and we're not in the title race, it could get really, really dark, and socials could be really, really, really toxic. And so I'm not really looking forward to it at all. There's a lot of pressure and a lot riding on this next season. And I hate the fact that we're going to start this season under duress. I know that it's like new season, but the last 2 seasons, the beginning of those 2 seasons have not felt light or fun or like, oh, we're just building into the season. They have felt like absolute hell from the very, very beginning. I like when people were staying up late at night to watch the MLS Skills Challenge to watch Kai fail, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And Timber getting the ACL on the first day of the season, and it was quiet in there, guys. Like, I was there, Nottingham Forest, first day of the season, sun is shining. I know that, Timber got the ACL, but it was quiet in the Emirates, and I'm just like, I haven't been there in like a year, and I know it's quiet in that bitch. I know that people are tired of watching this. It could get ugly. I think there'll be empty seats in like very early days if we don't look good. And I think it's going to be bad if we don't get a good summer in. So I hope they're ready. We're winning next year easy. Jonathan says he's second, third highest paid manager in the world. Pressure is warranted. Johnny says, nah, that's a stupid thing to say. There's no glory without trophies. So Arteta has not brought us back to glory. We do play like a team that should have glory, but we didn't yet. F says, even when we beat Real Madrid, a stat came up that saying that that's only the third time we've got to a CL semi in our history. I hate to say it, but we might be the smallest big club out there. Me and my friend were doing like a thing, like we wrote it down because we were having this conversation. Like, are we how big of a club are we? Like, I always consider there to be like a big 10, clubs that, I always consider like the big, big, big dogs, so that's like Bayern, Inter, Man City, Liverpool, in La Liga, it's the big ones, Atleti, Madrid, Barcelona, and then so we went through all the teams and I was like, we're right about in the 9th spot. I would say we're about the 9th spot. It could really go either way between us and Dortmund and these guys, and we could get lower if Manchester United ever got serious, so we're not like one of the top 5 clubs or anything like that. We are lower than that. We're about 10th probably, right about now. But yeah, we have underachieved. We're a domestic giant, I would say. And so we need to work towards getting that European pedigree and also winning our league again. So important. AC Milan is up there, Juventus, like teams like that, I feel like are the big ones, so yeah. Anton Dunn says, are you investing in next season's kits? Listen, these are great kits and I really like them. I want to see who we get first. I feel like I don't know if I want the kits or I want to spend the money if I don't feel like we're going to be good this season. I'm feeling very like toxic and negative right about now, so I will see when the summer kind of ends and we see the window, what we've done, and then I'll see if I want to spend money, because buying shit to wear for a club that is not winning is getting harder and harder for me, because their stuff is really expensive. And I have bills, like real like bills, so spending money on them just feels very like, so um we'll see, but it is a beautiful kit. Jonathan says that the home kit, pure red and white. I do think that like the real red color and the white, it should always just be red and white. I get that, we tried the gold, and that was like an homage to the unbeaten season and all that, and that was great. That was almost like a special edition kit in my opinion. But when we add blue, I don't think that that works for us. It doesn't feel Arsenal. The only ding that I would say for the home kit this season is that I don't like red socks. I think we look much better when we have white shorts and white socks, and we wore red socks. And so I was like, I don't love that. But the last two times that we've done blue on the home kit, I haven't loved it. I did like the kit that had the gold on it because it felt like a special edition, but it really should just be red and white. The away kit, that's the blue kind of lightning kit. It reminds me of one that we had a couple of years ago that had kind of like lightning bolts on it. That's cute. But the white and burgundy kit that is just it. That is the nicest one. Like, if we buy the right players, I will get that kit. I will get that kit, and I'll get the home one too. Jonathan says, which player would you get on your shirt if you could choose? I have Rice, Timber. I think I have Trossard. So I know I need to get a Saka one. I know I had, like, you're like, how do you not have a Saka one? I just don't get on my back. Like, I just don't. So Saka on the home one this season, if I do end up buying one, and then if we get a really good player, I will put them on that third kit. I want that third kit, the white. I want that bad, so yeah. But yeah, when we dropped the 100 million on Rice, I got Rice on the kit. I had to. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But I'm hoping that we like get somebody like good and special to put on these damn kits, Not like I don't love the players that we already have, but Ivy says no Kivior, no Kivior. Marco says 10 is up for grabs. Rodrigo, you listening? Yeah, it's really unfortunate that this is going to sound so fucked up, but I'm going to say it anyway. Jesus having the number 9. Yeah. Any striker that we get should get the number 9. I don't want them to have some strange number, and we shouldn't let anybody touch 14 anymore. We should actually hang it up like they do in basketball and retire a number, because everybody that touches it, except for I think Theo did pretty well with it, and Aubameyang did okay with it too. Actually, Aubameyang did really well with it. But I just don't feel like once Eddie had it, it was like, so it doesn't mean shit. So just retire the shit, So yeah, I think the 10 is available, the 14 is available. We really should take the 9, but you can't do that to Jesus. He'll cry. 3 is also available. That's a really good number. I think maybe Zubi might get that number because Miles Lewis-Skelly is going to keep his 49 or whatever he has. 20 is also available, which is a pretty decent number. So there's some decent numbers available that people can take. So we'll see. AP says, I'm holding out hope on Gyökeres until we sign that fraud Sesko. I don't dislike Sesko. I think he's a good player. Burmy says Jesus should be sold in Jan. IP says, number 10 and 14 should be reserved for proper players. Big says 3 is a defender's number, though, not a midfielder. It is, yeah, no, I hear that. 3 should really be a fullback. I just don't see Zubi taking anything other than a 1 digit. And there's no other ones to take. So he could take 20, I guess, but it's just he usually wears 4 or 5, so I can see him taking 3, but we'll see. Zubi 20. Tierney was 3, so that's leaving it for a fullback or something. Big says 3 as a defender's number. Oh, no, I read that one. Burmy says Jesus should have been sold. I read that one. So yeah, we have some really, really good numbers available. Jonathan says 14 still open. Please, Arsenal. We got some of the best kits that got wasted because they led to nothing. The 2022-2023 Black Away kit, my favorite one since the '02 days. Brian said, just honestly, if the standard for Arteta now is win a major trophy or you're sacked, it's already over. I mean, he has to feel that pressure, I think. I don't think he is maybe feeling it from the board, but I think any human with any sort of like respect for themselves would feel some sort of pressure at this stage. I don't think he's that delusional. He's not somebody that feels like he doesn't crumble under pressure. His teams crumble at every, any sort of adversity. So, yeah, he has to find a way to make things feel like I just want the team to look like they're up for the challenge of winning and not like they're shitting bricks because they know they're under pressure, because that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like the team is worried because they're under pressure rather than they're excited to take on the challenge of trying to win trophies. And I think that comes from the manager. I think the manager has to find ways to get the players to relax in pressurized situations so that they can perform. I think, to me, Klopp was a really good, he was really good at that. He was really good at when they were under pressure, they never looked like they were under pressure. They never looked stressed. They always looked like they were playing from a place of excitement to be in this big of a match or to go into the next Premier League game and snatch those 3 points. We look like we're under pressure and we're thinking about it too much. It's just always like they're all in their heads. And I wonder if that's because the manager is in his head. He needs to figure out a way to relax them because they're going to be under pressure. But the reality is, as an Arsenal player, you're always going to be under pressure. Obviously the pressure is worse than it's ever been because we haven't won anything. But even when you win something, the next year there's going to be pressure to do it again. So they need to get to a point where they can relax and feel confident being in a situation where you're constantly expected to win and play with a smile and play relaxed and have some fun. But they look like they're just like I told you guys earlier, they're going to a funeral, so Arteta needs to figure that out. Because if you're not excited to be in this situation, then you have to leave because Arsenal is always going to be under pressure to win trophies. You're never at Arsenal going to be in a situation where, especially now, because we've risen back to a place where people expect us to challenge, you're never going to be in a position where you're not expected to do anything. So if you can't handle it, you're going to have to go, so, and that includes the manager. Johnny says, I think that comes from bottling everything. The manager is an important piece, but not the main one. Then he says, I would even sack Arteta because it requires paying him off. I demote him to the academy for embarrassment and ruin his future for the chances of the biggest clubs. That's cold, man. Come on. Jonathan says, great point on Slot. Always calm. Arteta's got to calm on the sidelines. Do you feel like I know it's like a little bit like we're kind of like in our negative bag right now, but do you think there was any, I know it's it's just us right now, so we can be honest. Do you think there was any truth to the media criticizing Arteta being too excited on the sidelines and that making the team less calm, and maybe over celebrating here and there? I'm just asking. Upon reflection. Oh, there's a fly in here. Upon reflection, what do we think? Upon reflection, what do you think? Because there were times where I was like, okay, calm down, but I did think that the media was making maybe too much of a meal of it. But there are times where I feel like we're too cool, and there's times where I feel like we're too hot, where in the games, I thought our temperament and the way that we dealt with the Real Madrid tie was the best we've ever looked under pressure from start to finish. But it's so rare that we see us in that position because we're either too cool, meaning that there's not enough fire, or we're too hyped up. So then we're almost nervous, so I wonder. Taku says the media spouts nonsense at times. Arnolito says Inzaghi does it and the media loves it. Burmy says he over coaches on the sideline. I'm just asking, what you guys think. Because I think there could be a case where it's kind of right and kind of wrong at the same time. Johnny says maybe we need a psychiatrist, not a manager. Dato says we are afraid and don't have the X factor, plus the players don't have arrogance. Big says, what pressure? Players have become so complacent. That's why we always got the dip in the middle of the season. They look forward to the Dubai mid-season trip. Lackadaisical attitude. Nah, keep it going. Anchor says Sesko over Jokeris, can't afford Rodrigo. What a day. Yeah, Jess, who hates being micromanaged at work? Yes and no. Silent says, I'm 19 and watched Arsenal win 4 trophies in 7 years. No excuse for young Arsenal fans to support Arteta so blindly. Oh, that's intense. Jonathan says, I hated playing for managers who would not let you play. Yeah, so it's just, it's an interesting one because I do feel like sometimes Arteta does too much, but then sometimes I feel like the team is so incredibly flat when we play in big games that I'm not sure that it's Arteta on the sideline. That's, I think my criticism of Arsenal most of the times in games that we don't win is that we're flat, not that we're too jumpy or too nervous or whatever. I feel like in the first season we were. I felt like in the first season there was never a time where I felt like we were flat. In the 2022-2023 season, there was never a time where I felt like Arsenal were flat, ever. I always felt like we could score. I always felt like we would go forward. We would just be so excited, like excited puppies to play with our bone, that we would just leave everything open at the back, But there was never a time where I felt like we were too flat. Now, the next 2 seasons, I felt like there were times that we were super flat and we were too cool. So how do we find that midway? Redemption says, Jess, was the Madrid game major pressure though? Most people expected them to smash us. It was I feel like there was still, especially in the second leg, I felt like there was pressure going to the Bernabeu. I would never take that away from them. That it was pressurized. We may not have been we were the underdogs for the first leg, but we're not the underdogs anymore for this return leg. I had nightmares about us bottling that 3-goal lead. That's how bad it was. So I think they were under pressure, and I think they handled it really well. They went to the Bernabeu. They had to play against a good, like their actual star players and everything. And I know that they're not playing their best, but, I do think we're under pressure. Here to There says, yes, there is truth. Look at the excuses. Arteta constantly spews at how our players will parrot them in their interviews. He has transmitted that to the players and the fan base. F says, to be fair, I feel like Arteta has calmed down with the touchline antics last 2 years, and even then, he defo still lands planes at times. He has way less yellow cards than has like 3 this season or something like that. I know he's banned for the next game, but other managers have so many more yellow cards. So he has toned it down. He has not been at very amped up on the sideline this season. So I do agree with that. Johnny says, well, 2 months ago, they were saying Ange just sits there. He doesn't care. He looks disgusted on the sidelines. His own fans were saying that. Now we criticize the opposite because the first one won. Antidon says, I hate when Arteta is doing up ball boy on the sideline, even if we're winning comfortably. One day we will talk about the things that Arteta has done that gives me the ick, because there's quite a few. And it's super this is a niche topic for people that don't get sensitive about shit. Because, there's a lot of Arsenal fans that love him so much that if you say anything, it's like, how could you say that about him? But there are times where Mikel, I'm like, you are so oralist, man. Jonathan says, I hear both sides. Arteta is damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. Hear that. Redemption says that video he did before PSG was cringe. Nico says, disagree, Jess. The reason we performed well against Madrid is because we were the underdogs. But when he faced Arsenal, there was an exception of, okay, you beat Madrid and now the pressure is on. Fair enough. F says, Inzaghi wins, so it's not highlighted. Pep acts like a madman even after full time, but even though it gets highlighted, he's a winner, so it's laughed off. Arteta needs to win, and that's a really good point. Taku says, I don't care for what Arteta does on the sidelines. Arteta must win trophies. Arsenal are getting cooked in these streets. Um, um, Nooney says, just be honest. How does it feel wasting 6 years of your life and the fact we've been set back at least another 6 years as we will lose Saliba another year? I mean, it's tough. Like, I mean, I can't say that I've super enjoyed the last 6 years under Mikel. I think there's been ups and downs. I think there's been peaks and valleys. I think there's been times where I believed, and there's times that I've been like, get him out. Like, I've gone through the every emotion that you can possibly think of over these last 6 years. I would say that, you know, I still believe in the core group of this team being more than good enough to play for Arsenal Football Club, and that I don't think that it's necessarily that they're just not good enough. I think they need support, and when I say support, I think they need the pieces in the team that would have unlocked them after the 2022-2023 season to take them to that next level. I think they were just missing 2 or 3 pieces, and we really cocked that up, and since then, it's just become like the biggest knot, like, when you have like a chain around your neck, like a necklace or something, and it's like you take it off and you put it away, and then when you pull it back out, it has all these knots in it, and it just like it's kind of like we have this like big knot of things that just keeps getting worse and worse, and we're trying to untangle it, but we're kind of making it worse. And that's how I feel ever since that summer window, where that summer window was a perfect opportunity for us to go this way. And I feel like it's kind of made us go sideways and then down, um, because all the decisions post that have been a little bit like they still haven't fixed the initial problem. So, yeah, I mostly feel disappointed that this core group that I actually really like, because I did not like the Mustafi, Socrates, Kolasinac team. I did not like them. They did not say Arsenal. They did not feel like Arsenal. They felt like whiny babies. I didn't like it, so they were like a laughing stock. I couldn't do it. But this group, actually really like, and I would really like to see them win trophies at this club. So I'd rather see a new manager come in and know for sure that these players are not good enough than just keep the manager around and lose these players anyway, because I just feel like they're right on the edges. They just need a goal scorer. They need some more creativity, and they need somebody that's been there and done that and won the t-shirt. I think they need somebody that can lead them across the line. But yeah, the 6 years they're ups and downs, peaks and valleys. But I can also say that, like, because I'm a little bit on the older side, I know I've seen my team be good, so at least I know what it feels like. I feel more disappointed for people that this is the best they've ever seen Arsenal look. It cannot be. That's crazy. Jonathan says, once Arteta starts to win, all this will go away. He's an easy target. Quinn says, this manager never takes a seat and looks at the game. You always standing in the box, and that's a sign of nervousness. This manager never takes a seat and looks at the game. You always standing in the box. That is a sign of nervousness. Taku says, Arsenal are getting called the Sangria Stoke. Really? I haven't heard that. That's actually kind of funny. I can't lie. Johnny says, 22-23, we were not a contender from the get-go. Contender was a bonus. Then when they lost the 5-point lead, they started feeling the pressure and then collapsed in the Saliba's absence. Vic says, I realize one thing. Whenever the Arsenal media puts out, we need fans, we need everybody to play with us type videos, we fumble big time. Unnecessary pressure, play the game and not the occasion. And I think the fans will naturally be behind you if they, one, feel like you can win it. And from minute one, you start playing like you have some fucking sense. I think the fan base has kind of gotten more nervous because they're realizing that this team can't get it over the line. And one of the commentators in the US was saying it the best. They said it's the chicken or the egg kind of situation with the fans. It's like the players kind of are waiting for the fans to get them up, but the fans are waiting on the players to show them that they can win the game and that they have some energy and shit. And I think in early days in the 2022-2023 season, I think the fans did a lot of work. You had the Ashburton Army, the fans were really into it. They were very loud and very supportive. And now they're gonna need the players and the manager to lead them back. They're gonna have to play in some quiet and nervy stadiums to build the trust back. And so constantly asking the fans to be up for the game, but then you concede in the first 4 minutes against PSG and then shit your pants for the rest of the time is not really gonna help. So if they focus more on what they're going to do on the pitch and stop asking the fans, I think it will help because the fans are not going to do like it's all going to be fake if they're just cheering because they feel like they have to. They need to actually feel it. You like the Italian teams and Spanish teams, they never have to ask their fans to get up and get behind the team. And you never see the players like having to go like this a million times. That is very much so an England thing, but mostly it's an Arsenal thing. And that's because I think there's a lack of trust. Like, I really think there's a lack of trust. Um, let's see. Nico says if only Martinelli had played that through ball properly to Saka at Anfield at the 2022-23 at the death. Oh yeah. No, I hear that. Paperboy says if we're going to blindly back an ex-player, can it be a legend like Henri or Fabregas at least? I will understand it. Jonathan says not even just trophies. Get to finals, please. I miss Wembley. Abdilo says, what do you think about Nagelsmann, Jess? I mean, he's won. He's won before. Like when I say like when we talk about like generational young managers, that's the first person I think of, somebody that actually has won things. And I think I personally like think that he was totally done wrong by Bayern. But Bayern obviously have turned the block now and look much better. But at the time when they sacked him after he had won, I thought that that was just like ridiculous because they didn't win in the way that they felt like they should have been winning, whatever. But I think he's a good young coach that's won things before. And the prerequisite for me with any manager that comes in after Mikel is the first thing is, what have you won? And if you haven't won anything, then we'll push them down the list. And Nagelsmann has won before. When you think about generational young managers, he's probably one of the first ones that you actually think of. And if you can't get Xabi Alonso, get this guy. Anton Dunn says, who's going to buy Lakanga? Bayern? I don't even know. Um, Oh my gosh. Jonathan says, facts, Biggs, Jess. I hate the arm waves from Odegaard. I love Odegaard, but I don't like when he does that. Johnny says, if only Gabriel makes 3-1 in that free header, second half at Anfield, who knows where we are today. Burmy says, if rumors are true, several of our starters will stay. I'm concerned that we may not get what's needed due to holding on mediocre players. AK says hardcore Arsenal ultras have been priced out. EIE, the herd, if you know, you know. Jonathan says, besides Emery, Arsenal don't usually hire world-class managers at the time. Boxy says, still some good atmospheres in the UK, but is slowly dying due to ticket prices. And I feel like, people are telling me this, and so I take their word as bond because they're from London, but they say that there's a big difference between Northern culture and Southern culture, and the Southern fans can be a little bit more bougie. I guess that would be a word to call it, but the Northern fans are a little bit more like, they get down, like they want to. And the Northern, we actually for a long time struggled to go up north, and we still do to a certain degree. I just feel like the Southern or the Northern grounds are harder to win at. So like Anfield and the Etihad, and it used to be Old Trafford and Newcastle are more difficult, but their environments are much more different than when you go to Stamford Bridge or the Emirates or whatever. You'd be hard pressed to find a really good atmosphere in the South that's a big team. You'd have to go maybe to like Crystal Palace or something like that, where it's smaller and more intimate. One of the best atmospheres from a visual and being able to hear it in my speakers was actually Luton. That to me was fucking insane. I was like, I feel like I'm like on the pitch and it feels like they're on top. But like the Emirates is definitely a library. 100%, So you'll be hard pressed to find a good atmosphere down south. That's what they kind of were telling me. Johnny says Emery, world-class bottler at Arsenal. In one game, he bottled Europa League trophy, Champions League spot, and managed to destroy teams' confidence for the next season heading into 12th or worse. I don't subscribe to the Emery would have done anything better than what Arteta's doing at all. He was brought in for something specific. He was brought in to win the Europa League, and he didn't do it, and the fans were not connected to him. And to be honest, usually Arne Slot is very much so a unicorn in this situation because usually the guy after the guy really struggles. You know, you see it with Moisey, you've seen it with, Emery, you've seen it. Like the guy after the guy usually suffers pretty badly, and Arne Slot hasn't, but Emery was going to be no different. You know, Emery really struggled because he wasn't Arsene. He wasn't an Arsenal man. He didn't speak the language very well. His style of play was not great, and he just wasn't ready for the job. He's so different as a manager for Aston Villa that he was for Arsenal, so I don't think that if we would have just kept him, it would have just gotten better. I think it would have gotten worse because I think people forget that we were tunneling down the table. We had lost to Leicester 2-0 and we were sitting in 13th when Arteta picked us up, so I don't think it would have gotten better. I just think it was a different time where he needed to go back to Spain and reevaluate some things and then come to a team like Aston Villa that is looking to go up and the pressure is not so bad because Arsenal is kind of one of the more difficult jobs in Europe, right now, or there was when he picked us up. So, yeah. But Emery is a good coach. I would never say that he's not. Like, he's obviously a good coach. Paperboy says, not trying to offend people, but a lot of season ticket holders at Arsenal are 50 plus because of how high the prices are. Naturally, younger people have more energy. Jess, who do you rate higher, Wirtz or Musiala? I don't know. This is a tough question. I feel like from a playing perspective, I think like if I had to pick a player, I like Wirtz better. Musiala is probably too much of a dribbler for me, and I find dribblers sometimes to be so focused on beating the man that maybe they don't have enough end product. But that doesn't mean that I don't think Musiala isn't a fabulous young player. So yeah, I would say probably Wirtz would be rated higher to me, but that's not to say that I don't think Musiala isn't fabulous. I like watching him play too. Some players that really are good at carrying the ball and good at dribbling, I don't think maybe they could have a little bit more end product. Maybe that's, probably the only thing. YouTube censors our free speech says 70,000 Napoli fans were locked out of the stadium in Italy. Inter Milan had this title sewn up until a last-minute equalizing goal by Parma last week. That's wild. Blaze says, I have nothing against Emery, but people forget the final in Baku against Chelsea, and we conceded 30 shots against Watford. I was done with him. Like the first Arsenal game that I ever went to was Emery in 2018 when we played against Brighton, and it was a horrendous game. It was cold and it was quiet in there. Like I just remember how quiet it was, and me and my mom were so excited to be there because we had never went to an Arsenal game before. And so we're like happy, like we in the club level, we had just had some drinks, like we're hyped. And anytime that we said anything or got excited about anything, people were looking at us like, shut the fuck up. Like, it was just like, it was wild. All you could hear, like you could look straight down and you could just see all the Brighton fans and they were like all up and shit and excited. And we were just like, everybody was like a statue in the stadium. And Aubameyang scored the penalty, and it looked like we were going to win that game. Mind you, in a 7-game stretch, we just needed to win one game to get top 4, and that's all we needed. And somehow we ended up drawing that game because Xhaka drug one of their players down in the box for no reason, and they scored the penalty, and we left that game and only got the point. And I just remember one of the Brighton fans looking up towards me and flipping me off. And I was like, this is just the worst day of my life. Seriously. Like I could just simply pass away. Like, this is just horrendous. AP says, Fab update on Wirtz as he's basically done to Liverpool. Oh my gosh. That is bleak. Let's look. It's just dark, isn't it? But you know what? We always knew this day would come when people around us started getting serious, and we had our period of time where it was just us and City. We had about like 2 seasons where it was just us and City, and somehow we weren't able to get it done. So, yeah, we just have to hold that because Arne Slot has them. Arne Slot is just he's just got it, man. But we'll see. Everybody's like, oh, hopefully, Salah and Virgil van Dijk just fall off. I'm like, we're really hoping that players do the, contract, the sign the team fall off for us to do something. It's dark, man. It's dark. Bleak stuff, guys. Willow says, Jess, suppose you were a Man U fan, how would you be feeling right now? I would simply, what's wrong with you? You about to throw up? What's wrong? Don't throw up while I'm on this stream. You want to come up here? You're annoying, man. I would simply just not want to be here anymore if I was a Man United fan, because they have been so chatty for the last couple of seasons talking about, yeah, but we've had a better season, but you guys are shite. Like, like that was one team that I was a little concerned when they signed Amorim. I was like, oh, but he may be a good coach, but now I'm like, no, it's fine. Jonathan says Wirtz, and we're out here battling for Sesko. Put the second place in the bag. We may finish like third because Man City will be back next season, guys. Like they're not going to be bad like they were this season. Let's be honest. Miss M Star Fracture says, thing is, our fans really thought no one else would try to get good again and compete. Fast forward a couple years and you could easily imagine us scraping a top 4 next season. Johnny D says, we never wanted Wirtz. They did want Subi, though. They have to hold that. A team that never wins gets the big players in front of them. Listen, to be honest, like I do think that, it sucks watching other teams get good players when you don't believe that your team is going to get those big players as well or get it right. If we were more consistently good in the transfer window and I could trust them that they were going to get it done, from my perspective, like I'd be like, oh, that's a good signing, but I'd be like, but my team is going to do what we need to do. I think there's a lot of trust broken. If you didn't have trust, then it was never there. But if you did kind of trust the club or believe that they're going to do the right thing, and you lived through last summer, I think it was broken. So I think that's where the disappointment comes from, because I'm like, I don't have a problem with us getting Sesko. Because I always kind of imagine the striker signing will either be him or Gyökeres. My concern is the left winger being a top level player, and I wanted to get another midfielder, and I don't think we're going to get that. So, yeah, it's tough. It is tough, man. Jonathan says, we took 3 months to confirm Marino. We're moving slow. Redemption says, Liverpool have the best sporting director in the game. Yeah, I mean, they do have a really good sporting director, and they've been like a well-oiled machine for a long time. And it helps when you have a manager that can make players better that are already in the team. I think the most impressive thing about Arne Slot this last season was what he did with Gravenberch and what he did with Cody Gakpo. Klopp couldn't figure out what to do with the two of those players, and he almost got 2 new signings by just using those players in a different way than Klopp did. And that helped them a lot because Luis Diaz is kind of in and out. So Gakpo scored a lot of big goals this season for Liverpool, and Gravenberch solve their CDM position. So, yeah, I mean, it helps when you have a good manager that can see things. What's wrong with you? Don't you throw up. I'm not having it today. Um, but yeah, it really helps when you have a manager that can do those things. And then, yeah, they've been a well-oiled machine for a long time. I've said this for a long while, even though Arsenal fans try to constantly compare what we're doing to what Liverpool did. Liverpool, in their first iteration of their team, got every single position correct. Every single signing was like right. They may have had like one or two duds, like um Thiago Alcantara and Minamino, and they had one other player that they spent a lot of money on that ended up not being good. Um, forget what his name is, but I can see him in my head. But for the most part, they got the entire attack correct. They had the midfield was perfect. They had the perfect back line. They got the best goalkeeper they could possibly find, and then they had a world class coach, and they worked that window as well as they could. And they only won one Premier League in that time, but they also won Champions Leagues, and then they also won some cups here and there too. So they can look back on that time as probably a little bit sore just because they had such a good team that had to go up against the best iteration of City and they could only win one. But they got absolutely everything correct and had a team that pushed City into 100 points one season for them to win the league. That's how tough it was, right? Um, and so they can look back on that and say that that was a like pretty much the perfect version of a project, maximizing a window of time where you build a team from start to finish and it does what it needs to do. Now they're on their second iteration of the team, and that second iteration has already one one trophy. They've already won a Prem. So, and they also got to an FA Cup final, or Carabao Cup final. So, yeah, it's we're not doing anything like Liverpool. Every time we're saying like, "Oh, we're doing the Liverpool," we're not doing no fucking Liverpool. The fuck? Like, we're not doing nothing like Liverpool. Liverpool made sure they built the perfect squad and let that squad do what it needed to do for like 4 or 5 seasons. We're not doing that. We don't have a Salah type player that's going to score striker like level goals, for consistent seasons for 4 or 5 seasons or longer. We don't have a dynamic duo of Sadio Mane and Salah that just kill people. We don't have a consistent midfield that always dominates. We don't have that, so yeah. Um, so Liverpool, when I look at what they're doing, I just don't see that many similarities except for the fact that we have American owners. I don't really see that many, similarities. Gurmy says if Liverpool get Gyökeres, the season is over before the season. Are they actually looking at Gyökeres? I'm wondering. Are they actually considering Gyökeres? Because I haven't seen them being linked to him. I've seen them being linked to Alvarez and Isak and Seshko, but not Liverpool. Oh, okay. So yeah, they are interested in they are interested in Gyökeres. Okay, fair enough. Um, let's see. Wayne says AFTV. Who we going to get Arteta's cult fan base? Lionette says injuries will always have the biggest impact, whatever you do. Taku says a player who helped Leverkusen to their first Bundesliga title isn't world class. This is like saying Krava isn't world class after he helped Napoli lift the Scudetto. Are we talking about Xhaka? Y'all talking about Xhaka? F says, this is why when Hussam says FSG are worse than the Cronkies, I disagree, because at the very least, they appoint the best sporting directors, players, and managers. Oh, and they win. Yeah, Hussam's just trying to play like he's destitute or something like that. He's not destitute. He is Liverpool are just not City. Like, that's the only team that they need to look at and say, wow, they're actually like, they're doing this and that. Like Liverpool are shitting in high cotton right now. I would do anything to have what they have in terms of their structure. It's not perfect. And again, they have a manager that knows how to make what he has better. He found a way to make sure that Salah played in his best way. He made sure that he could utilize Gakpo. He made sure he could utilize Gravenberg. It's just when you have a manager like that, the opportunities are more. It's just it makes the squad feel so much bigger, So you're not in the same position as us. You're not worse than us. Like the fuck? Yeah, and like you said, they win. Hello? You know? So that's a crazy thing to fucking say. Johnny says Kvaratskhelia is world class, where it's not yet. We'll see this season what he can pull. Leverkusen is zero pressure FC. That's crazy, man. Kvaratskhelia is world class, Wirtz is not yet. Well, what would make Kvaratskhelia world class and Wirtz not? Because I know Kvaratskhelia has now won with PSG, but Wirtz has won the Bundesliga when they're not supposed to win, and he was a massive part of that. So what's the difference between what Kvaratskhelia has done and what Wirtz has done? Jordan said, I said if we wanted to win the league, we needed to bring in attackers that score at a high volume. Gyökeres, Sorloth, Lookman, and sell Havertz and Jesus and Martinelli. Nico says, Jess, I heard they're selling Nunez and getting Alvarez. I've seen that too. Like Liverpool are making some big moves. Like they are pushing and they're trying to really support Arne Slot because I think they realize that they have a special manager. And so they could really they could go on and win so much in this next amount of time. So they're doing the smart thing and trying to capitalize on, improving from a positive standpoint instead of thinking that you're so good that you don't really have to do this or you could buy Havertz or something like that and then realizing, oh shit, and then, oh, you don't have any money, So yeah, I think they're doing the right things and, more power to them. I don't really have that much vim for them. So, I'm disappointed that it feels like they're going to be leading the pack maybe next season with the signings that they're making, but I don't have any vim. I just wish my club would do more. Nico says, think about it though. Who is actually a better 10 than Wirtz in world football? I'm trying to understand. I don't really see, you know, why Wirtz would not be considered world class. By my definition, he's world class, top 3 in your position for more than 2 or 3 seasons. And I feel like there's not very many 10s out there that are better than Wirtz, but I don't know. Jordan says, I think Wirtz improves Liverpool, but he's not Messi. What will hurt us is if we do not strengthen where we need to strengthen. We need a 10, we need a winger, a striker, and a Saka backup. I think the one thing that concerns me is that what I would love for Arteta is for him to change his system, but the signings that we're looking to make and the signings that it doesn't feel like we are going to make means that we're going to double down on a system that already doesn't work. So, or is odd or doesn't maximize how good this team could potentially be. I don't see why we can't play with Rice and 2 8s, one being more attacking, one being, more of like a, I don't know, how do you explain, like more like a City type midfield when they had like Rodri, maybe not Rodri. I think it was Fabinho. Or no, sorry, Fernandinho. Sorry. I'm thinking Liverpool. Fernandinho, David Silva, and Kevin De Bruyne. And why we can't do that with Declan. Declan as our Fernandinho, Odegaard as our David Silva, and then find our Kevin De Bruyne, which obviously the perfect opportunity would be Wirtz, but we're not in that conversation. But maybe somebody like Xavi Simons, somebody that can be that real goal scorer, assist getter that, complements an Odegaard. And also, you have a Declan, your Fernandinho behind them that cleans up everything. I don't know why we can't play like that and why we're doubling down on playing Declan in the 8 and then bringing in a Jorginho-like DM. I love Zuby, and I think he's going to make a difference for us. But I feel like our maximum best level would mean that everybody in midfield plays their best position, and Declan in the 8 doesn't feel like his best position. So when people say, "Well, we'll get a 10," I'm like, I would love for us to get a 10 and to play a completely different system, but I don't feel like we're gonna change the system. I think if you spend 50,000,000, 60,000,000 on Zuby, you're basically saying, "I'm gonna play the 6 and Declan and Odegaard," and I don't feel like that maximizes Odegaard or Rice, to be honest. Johnny says, "Well, Jess, if Wirtz comes to Liverpool and delivers, I'll be happy to eat my words. But if the reverse happens, he had proved 0 in capital matches and that Atalanta final or CL games." That's fair enough. That's fair enough. You know, I hear that. We will see. Blaze says, "People forget Wirtz came back after a serious injury and helped Leverkusen win the Bundesliga. He's a top player." Burmese says LFC is doing what AFC should have done after 22-23, hoping Berta can secure major signings so we can be competitive. I feel like he's going to have to do something special. The links that we have going right now, if we were to finish the transfer window with Zubamendi, Sesko, Nico Williams, and a goalkeeper, I'm not sure that would really ring, "Oh, we're pushing for it, we're going for it." There's gonna have to be some aces up the sleeve to really beef up that window to mean that we're, really taking the team to the next level, but we will see. Jordan says, "Max Dowman is our Wirtz, but a manager like Arteta will not develop him to be that." We have Ethan, Miles Lewis-Skelly, and Dowman that are either in the team or getting close to the team. And my concern with the 3 of them is, not really a concern, but I want to see how Arteta develops those players because, those are not resources that Arteta and Arsenal can afford to let just go astray. And I haven't seen Arteta really develop attacking players before. I know that this is like a bone of contention and kind of like a debate amongst the fans, but we already kind of knew a little bit about Saka and Martinelli when Arteta first came in because they were already kind of in the team. And I know that Saka was playing left back, but outside of him, like Martinelli to me, outside of the 2022-2023 season, has not really progressed. Like he's pretty much been the same player. And some of the highlights that he had when he first got here, he hasn't reached those, so I don't know if can you credit Arteta with developing Martinelli? Can you credit him with developing Saka? And outside of that, because he hasn't bought anybody outside of Gabriel Jesus and Trossard, I don't really know how he's going to develop attackers. We know that people are like, "Oh, he made Sane and Raheem Sterling," but we shall see. Because one thing that we know for sure is we had a manager that knew how to develop attacking talent. If he didn't know how to do anything else, he knew how to get an attack clicking. You can find clips online right now, comps right this moment on YouTube of really bad Arsenal teams that played really good football, like 2016, 2017, like whatever, like very end of Wenger that played way better football than what we play now. And those players were not the best, so we're talking, so I think, it's going to be interesting to see how he utilizes and develops players that are really meant to be playing in forward areas. I know that MLS is kind of like a DMCM, but I view him as a left center mid. So we'll see. Johnny D says, "I agree with the offensive improvements. Arteta needs to be more serious with the offensive work." Jonathan says, "Same with Emery. He had Abba, Laka, Martinelli balling. Arteta struggles with attackers." Yeah. Wayne says, "KSG got proper sports director, proper manager. That's why they were able to succeed. Not a novice like Arteta and do that to failure at the highest level." Lionide says, "Sancho was world-class in the Bundesliga, apparently." I think we need to relax on this whole thing, the words, because we're all like, it's okay. Like, I know we're gonna all predict whether or not he's gonna bang or he's gonna fail, but I saw Paperboy said he's the biggest player on the market in Liverpool. We're getting him. If we were getting him, I don't think we would be saying, "Oh, he's not world class." I think we'd be fucking gassed. I think obviously we'd rather him fail, but with a manager like Arne Slot, even if he's not world class now, I would assume that he's going to be able to get something good from him. So, I don't want it to turn into a disingenuous conversation, So, Douglas says if we end up with Sesko and Williams, but Liverpool sign Wirtz and Gyökeres, nobody will be looking at our team and feel threatened by what we have up front, barring Saka. Taku says Arteta is a walking paradox. How can you play with Dino, Xabi, etc., be assistant to Pep and not play attacking football? I mean, assistant to Pep, played under Arsene, grew up at La Masia, played for PSG when Ronaldinho was there. But you can take the Everton, you can get it's like you could take the boy out of Everton, but can't take the Everton out of the boy. I don't know. I feel like that particular experience has informed his way of play more than anything else. Jonathan says Arteta's whole staff is from Atleti. That's why he plays Haram. Victor says, holy, the PL hype is mad. PL fans put down other leagues so much. F says, Gyökeres and Rodrigo are my last hopes in us winning the league. Otherwise, forget it, in my opinion, unless we combine 2022 and the 2 seasons for the full season, which I seriously doubt, not looking good in my opinion. Jess, this is the same fan base that said Arteta can rediscover Havertz form in the Bundesliga when we signed him. Signing Sesko simply means that Havertz will be starting up front come game week 1 next season. And yeah, I think that's the biggest concern, and I can totally understand that because I have that concern. My whole goal for this summer window would be to make it so that Havertz is moved on in the next 2 windows. I know that sounds harsh, but having somebody of his level and quality on such high wages for me is just obstructive to what we want to do. And I don't think there's there's no way around it that it hasn't been a great signing. So if you bring in a top level striker, and then you have Rice and Zubimendi in there, there's just no he's cornered out. There's no reason to, he's not going to play midfield and he's not going to play up top. But if you get Sesko, he's definitely going to be starting, and Arteta's already starting his bullshit. This whole, oh yeah, he's looking, what did he say? He's bulking up and shit. I don't care about that. I really don't care about that. How is that going to help him lock his ankle? How is that going to help him put the ball in the back of the net? How is that going to help him be 2 or 3 inches shorter so he could be the player that he was at Leverkusen? Because I'm hoping that Max Daumann doesn't grow another inch, because I don't want him to become Havertz. Havertz grew those extra 2 inches or whatever, and it ruined his whole flow. He just, so I don't know what it is about Havertz and the obsession with the guy. And it's just, if this is your ideal player, Mikel, is a player whose best qualities are off of the ball, a space eater, take your ass to Everton. Not even Everton. Go to Sociedad. Like, what the fuck? This is Arsenal. Johnny says, if we sign Sesko so Havertz can start, fire Arteta now. I hate what loser in big moments Havertz is 10 times more than all I like about Arteta combined. Let's see. Nico says, Havertz is a false footballer. And Jonathan says, Havertz is that kid whose dad owns the team. That's funny. Gunnar says, I will never forgive Arteta for Havertz. Burmy says, no more rejects. Sign some big names who have real talent. So what players, so we'll go for another 20 minutes or so. But what players do you guys want to see? Like, if you had the reins, what players do you think would make the biggest difference? And make it realistic. Don't come up here talking about no Mbappe, what kind of players? would you want to see come in to Arsenal in the positions that we're looking at? Left back, striker, left wing, maybe even attacking mid. What players would you like to see come in? If you were a sporting director, because I don't even know. He's just so cute. I'm sorry. Go lay down over there. Let's see. Yamal play him in the 10. Jonathan says, Eze, Xavi Simons bring some ballers back to the club. Yeah, I mean, about that, because if you want to do the wing fielder attacking mid position, it's never been a better time to bring one in. There's Eze, there's Xavi Simons. Even if you want to go cheap, there's Shirky, there's also El Canus. There's really no reason not to bring in somebody to add more creativity to this team in midfield. I think when we play against deep blocks, there is no reason to have two DMs. There's no reason to have, what will end up being Zubamendi plus Declan Rice in there. You need to choose a DM, kick somebody to the curb, and then play two more attack-minded midfielders. Why not? Because you don't even play with overlapping fullbacks. So your fullbacks are no use to the attack anyway. So you have all four defenders back. All four defenders back in a DM. You got 5 people back there to defend. Why can't you have, 5 people in attack? What's the problem? I don't understand why we can't do it. Due or Ekitike as a 9. Lookman is so slept on. Foxy, the funny thing about you saying Joe Willock is I remember a couple years ago, we were having this whole debate about, people were frustrated about, I think it was Fabio Vieira. People were saying we shouldn't have sold Willock. It was a big mistake. And I said that as soon as Newcastle get ready to spend some money and make it shake, one of the first people they're going to kick to the curb is Joe Willock. And I see that you guys are open to letting him go. Anton Dunn says, Mbomo, Gyökeres, Rodrigo. Gyökeres, Rodrigo, Eze. I'm moved. I feel like if you want to do up nostalgia Disney, go get Eze. If you want to be at the Disney Club, I'm fine with that, but at least bring in equality. I would love to bring in Eze. The biggest thing about Eze that I like is that I like players that you kind of know what you're going to get. Sometimes it's nice to know, okay, this is exactly what this player is. My only concern about Xavi Simons is it Bundesliga tax or is it not? How is he going to deal with the pace of the Premier League and the physicality? Because y'all don't like players that, fall down on the ground. I've seen the way that y'all talk about Odegaard when he gets knocked off the ball. He also gets knocked off of the ball a lot. So I wonder if, how his introduction to the Premier League would be and if Arteta could get him into a free role so that he's not, basically suffering the same fate as Emil and Fabio Vieira. But I think Eze is somebody that that the pace of the Premier League and the physicality is not something that he'll struggle with from a technical standpoint. He is brilliant. He scores goals. He has audacity, X factor, all the things. And if you want to go Disney, there's no better way to go Disney than to bring somebody back who is in your academy. So let's do it. Here to there says Xavi Simons doesn't have the best injury record. That's my concern. Jordan says Eze is technically brilliant. Taku says Arteta will kill Eze. Here to there says, I like Willock, but his fitness has failed him. Burmy says, Xavi Simons is a shout. Jagador says, hi, can I have your thoughts on Rodrigo to Arsenal? The only thoughts that I have on that is Ornstein has mentioned it. And so basically all they've really said is that we really like him. And of course we want him, but doesn't mean it's going to happen. No. Ornstein was very non-committal about it. Like, we know that Arsenal like him, but we don't know if it'll get done, so blah, blah, blah. And then there's other less credible kind of people saying that there's talks happening and stuff like that. So I would say just in general that we probably are interested in him and trying to see if the deal can get done. It's probably a difficult deal to get done anyway. So those are kind of my thoughts. Would I take him if he was available? Abso-fucking-lutely. I wouldn't even think twice. I wouldn't even think twice. Like, I just don't feel like there's just certain players that have a certain level of quality that I just, you know, I'm seeing 80 million euros, which is like 67 million pounds. Like, there's just, you don't need to think about bringing in a player like that, you know? Douglas says, bring in Rodrigo and Gyökeres up front, a right center back as backup for Saliba, and probably Xavi Simons to create competition for Odegaard, or the other option would be Eze to boost the English quota in the team. That's a good shout. Willock's been good for us overall. Unfortunately, the injuries have ruined him. It's getting to that time for him, sadly, where he's next on the list. Fair enough. Here to there says, oh, I read that one. Victor says Barcola, Eze, Reinders, Gyökeres. I would love for us to have one of those windows where Ornstein says, like, Arsenal are, advancing in talks for Eze, but, they're still going to get the left winger too. It's not, it's Eze plus a left winger, one of those where people are like, oh, Arsenal's so greedy, like one of those where people are like, oh my gosh, they're like really getting serious. Oh, I wish that was us just once. But that's a cute little window there. I like that. I would love something like that. I know Reinders is going to go Man City, but it'd be so cool to get just have a lot of good shit at once, wouldn't it? Jonathan says August, Jesus, and Tamiyasu are like new signings. Oh, kill myself. Johnny says if Umberto we trust, we got no other choice now. Period, man. We have no other choice. Let's see. Question: can Odegaard play the role that Pedri does for Barcelona at Arsenal? I think Odegaard's best role for Arsenal going forward is probably going to be a deeper role. Just because if he can't be free and he's just sequestered on one side, he might as well just play a little bit deeper and kind of control the tempo and, dictate from a deeper position, kind of like how Pedri does, and, make late runs here and there. But my ideal scenario, like I was saying earlier, would be Declan Rice playing the 6. I know that people are like, oh my God, but he doesn't do this and that. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. You spent 100 million on a DM, make it work. Make it work. I like Declan Rice doing the odd, cosplay as Gerrard. It moves me too, but not against the deep blocks. I really need you guys to get a more technical midfielder on the left-hand side, and then they can be a little bit more free, and then it could be Odegaard and Declan in there. And then, like I said, the kind of midfield that I'd be looking to build is more of like a Fernandinho, David Silva, KDB. I think that would be a better use of both Odegaard and Rice than how we're utilizing them now. But alas, I am not Mikel. And Mikel said, you will struggle. You will watch this suffer ball and you will like it. F says, Palace valued Gahey at 70 million. I hear that they value Wharton at 100 million. Imagine the price they put for Eze. I think Eze is going to cost less, I don't think he'll cost like 100 million. I think he's still at like 60 something or whatever. So, but we will see. But Wharton is definitely going to be a 100 million pound midfielder. He is good. Jonathan says technical midfielder. Mikel's left 8 currently is Rice, Marino, and Havertz. Jesus wept. Here to there says agreed, Jess. Honestly, with the way LFC are moving, we probably need 200 million net spend window to compete with them. We definitely need to figure out all the things that are not working, and we have some very obvious holes. Like, it's not that hard to see what we need, in my opinion. A striker, a new left wing that probably is more of a creative left wing. I know that we kind of had a goal scoring left wing over the last couple of seasons with Martinelli being the starter. But now that we don't have Jesus, and Jesus is more of like a creator that would float out left, with Havertz, he's more of stationary and he kind of veers to the right and doesn't help link up on the left. it leaves Martinelli in a position where he has to be more creative and he has to fend for himself, and it doesn't work, So I think the left wing has to be more creative. And when I say more creative, I'm saying it needs to be a Rodrigo or a Xabi Simons or Eze type, somebody that can create on that side. That's going to take so much pressure off of Saka and Odegaard on the other side. And because you're going to have Rice, there's just no way that you can have Rice as your left center mid and no Zinchenko. And it's Miles Lewis Skelly does his thing, but he's, the left center mid has got to be able to create. Must. Like, it cannot be Martinelli. I'm so sorry. Martinelli can still be in the squad, but it just can't. Wharton is a baller. 100 million is mad, though. Guess that's the prices they set. Though we spent 100 million on Rice. When did DMs become so expensive? I don't know. But Wharton will go for 100 million. He is English, he is English, and he's very good. And I would love Wharton, but yeah, there's just no way we'll get him now. Havertz needs to be sold. Taku says, makes sense. Oh, yeah. Wait, makes sense. Mikel could manage for 2,000 years and still struggle with deep blocks. Guys, if we struggle with deep blocks this coming season, I will simply pass away. There's just no way that I will live through another season of, it's the deep block, though. Like, I'm not trying to hear that shit. We've been coming up against deep blocks for 5,000 years, so you must be able to figure out how to break them down. And unfortunately, the kind of midfield that you're building is going to be pretty much the same as what you have now. So if you don't have dribblers in that front line, you're going to be in trouble. Like, you need to have dribblers in that front line. Burmy says, prioritize the attack. Aside from Zubi, the front line signings must occur before the left back or the center back. The fact that we're going to get a left back, center back, and another goalkeeper kills me. Victor says, if we get Rodrigo, we have to get an overlapping fullback. Rodrigo is creative, yes, but he has a big central bias. So playing him as a touchline winger won't work. We have to revamp that left center mid spot ASAP. Is Xhaka fucking available? Xhaka, do you want to come back? Like, seriously? It's just, why have we not figured this out? But yeah, I guess, an overlapping fullback. And it would be nice to have overlapping fullbacks in your team. Ben White does do overlapping, but nobody on the left-hand side really does it. And the left-hand side still needs surgery. It needs surgery. Like, the pieces don't really work together. So Johnny says, yeah, we need talent to kill the deep blocks. That's the bare minimum for winning the league. Especially because everybody employs them against us. Like, the amount of teams that are just going to sit back on us because they know that we struggle with it. It's like, we must, so bring Xhaka back. Please solve this. He'll solve the problem. Because with Rice there, if you have Rodrigo there, does that work? Rice and Rodrigo? Like, I know Rodrigo plus Saka eats. Like, I know that's going to be cool. Like, I know that's going to eat down. But what do Rice and Rodrigo work together? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Bring Xhaka back in the black kits, all solved. Exactly. Jonathan says, funny thing is Mikel was an 8, but he can't figure out left center mid. The guy is just obsessed with the box crasher. Johnny says, Xhaka, Havertz, swap, and we are champions. 10 games to spare. Oh, my goodness. Blaze says, we didn't replace Xhaka very well. We didn't replace him at all, man. We just did some nonsense. So, yeah, I don't even know. I just feel like if left center mid is more creative, I do think that will help. I just see, like, I guess the main thing is, when we're playing at our best, and we haven't played at our best in a while, but the right-hand side is pretty much automatic. and it's hurt us this season having out of form Odegaard out injured, Saka out injured, and Ben White out injured. So the right-hand side is not as automatic as it used to be. And then also because the left-hand side is dead, they're like just sitting on top of the right-hand side and keeping us from being able to flow on that side. But the left-hand side has just like no vibe and no flow. So no combination that we've used over there has felt right. So yeah, they need to figure that out. Bring back Gilberto Silva. I'm down for that, and bring back Vieira while you can. Just bring the old gang back, But we'll see what happens. But listen, Arsenal women play 9 a.m. for me, whatever time that is for you guys. So I'll be up watching that, and then I'll be on after, because Sunday is the whole like championship day or whatever. So we'll definitely talk about that then. But tomorrow I'll definitely like kind of recap the women's game and kind of see how you guys are feeling, and maybe we'll get some good news for once, instead of this bad fucking news. But yeah, make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel on your way out. Dragoon, I'm not going to do a watch along because I'm going to be so ill watching this game. I need to be like in my own, like I need to be behind the couch. So no watch along, but maybe we'll do like a watch along for these championship Sunday or whatever. And then so we can watch all those games at the same time together. That'll be easier. But yeah, we'll talk tomorrow, and make sure you like and subscribe on the way out. And I'll see you guys, in, I don't know, 12 hours or whatever it is. All right, bye. See you guys.